Hello and welcome to episode 67 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. This is your co-host Russ on this side, and over there...
This is Mike, and you sound pretty chipper over there, like we're going to have this fun episode, but I don't know.
Well, we'll see.
It was kind of an odd week of listening and other things, apparently.
But I have to say, today was about the nicest weather you could imagine here. And we've been preparing for the rainy season. It's at the doorstep. But today it was like 25 degrees Celsius, sunny, breezy. I was outside. My tomatoes are ripening up. My hot peppers are on the way. I barbecued a whole chicken out there, ate that thing, bottle of wine. And here I am. I'm in a good mood. Well, we'll see what happens with the music, but...
Yeah, I know. It kind of put us off a little this week. Although, I have a few interesting things to say about the jazz, though. I liked it.
Oh, there's some good stuff in there, yeah. And, well, just as we had a false start tonight, we were about to start, and we were interrupted by Mike's CD delivery.
Yeah, there you go. The truck pulled up, and... it took me about 10 minutes to get all those CDs into the house, because you know what it's like, when you get... they just kind of dump them on your porch like that. That's the way they do it. They can't use a drone because it would have to be the size of an Air Force kind of like military chopper, in order to carry it all. So they use trucks.
Yeah. Well, when the rains do start, you're going to have enough to listen to on your new discs there. So that's good news.
I'll have plenty to listen to. Yeah. Got to get some new speakers though. Coming up. I'm planning to finally buy those, but it's gonna hurt with the although the reason I want to get these speakers now is because the yen is really, really weak.
Ooh. And
the speakers are still the same price they've always been, so I figure this is going to be a good time to do it. But maybe I better do it soon.
Better do it sooner
before they boost those prices up. They'll be out of my reach.
Yeah, before there's a paper cone or some kind of shortage. Oh, everything you read about is all kinds of shortages.
That's been a problem with stereo equipment, hasn't it? There's a chip shortage, and now you can't buy receivers and.
It's hard to get anything that has a chip. I was thinking of getting another network player. Forget about it. You can't get one. They're all out of production. There's no new models in stock. The used ones are going for double almost what they were before. I just bought this amp. I don't know, was it the year before, for my second system up here?
Right.
Here, I bought that for about US $500. It was a pretty good deal. I looked, the same one now is more than $1,000.
Wow.
It's tough times.
Better hold on to that.
I'm holding on to everything that I have. Yeah. So
Yeah, you were recommending that Yamaha amp to me too earlier in the year, and then suddenly it went out of production when I was about to buy it.
Yep.
But there was a Sony made one that I also liked. I watch movies too, so I wanted Blu-ray things, but I also want the surround SACD capability, and the only way to get that, unless you're going to pay $2,000, $3,000 for an SACD player by itself, which is insane. You can only get that on a sort of a Blu-ray player because Sony kind of made all that equipment, so they still keep it alive in their equipment, which is nice. So I get to hear surrounds. I could even play audio DVD on this thing, and that's a format that's dead. It's just they don't make those anymore. And so it's nice to have something like that where you can just kind of play anything. Yeah,
I'm glad I invested in my Luxman gear years ago, and I got the SACD there. I'm sure
you got the real audiophile thing. I've got mid-range audiophile. I'm going for mid-range audiophile now, but he's high class over there.
Wow, that will probably outlast me.
I have a smaller house,
and we'll see. I like to keep this other system going here too, but it's hard to get anything new now too. So we'll just see.
I'm a single man. I can't get that married tax break. See, but the thing is, you don't get the tax break, so you can't afford it. But then if you get married, your wife won't let you get it, so you just lose both ways. Sort of.
Yeah, you've got other considerations then too. So Anyway, be happy with what we have, and thanks to streaming that we can listen to all of this music one way or the other, although I'll have some specific complaints about that format this evening when we get into our selections.
I'm looking forward to hearing that, actually. Okay. I had to stream a classical recording this week, too, because the CD didn't arrive on time. which is kind of a pain.
Well, I've got everything set up now that my music follows the same electronic path, whether it's CD or streaming, so it's indistinguishable, at least to these aging ears.
Well, yeah, for the classical though, I like having the booklets so that I can get some extra information. Because I'm usually on this show, it's not like we're doing all Beethoven and Mozart. And I already have this information. A lot of these composers are new to me. I don't know who they are. I want to know something about them before I get on and start talking about them. Be
the problem with the jazz this evening, believe it or not.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But we'll get to that in time. Before we do, I'd like to remind everyone listening out there that in the episode description, you're going to find links for Spotify and Apple Music to all the music we'll discuss. Also at the top of the description, speaking of streaming, you'll find the full episode playlist. That's all the music we're going to discuss tonight in one place on Deezer. That's our preferred streaming platform, CD quality. Nice selection of jazz and classical music. You can follow us there at username Adult Music Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast there, as they have podcasts as well. If you don't see the full description or links on whatever app or platform you listen to us on, then come on over to our host site, Podbean, podbean.com. You can find us there, and all the links for every episode are clear and easy to follow. If you do enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you're listening to us on. Take a moment. Just give us a ranking. Give us a 5-star ranking. It's free. Helps us out.
5 stars, please.
Or write a short review. Either or will help us get listed in the browsing category recommendations. That helps us grow our audience, which we're always happy about. You can also now find us on Facebook. We've got a page there. Just look for us, Adult Music Podcast. You can also get the upcoming playlist, the episode, and assorted videos related to the artists and a little bit of humor that we post during the week. We'd like to see comments.
Yeah, I haven't been posting there. I got to get on that more. I don't know.
Get busy. Yeah. I put 2 videos up there this week. So you can get in touch with us through there. Or if you want to contact us directly, any comments, questions, we'd be happy to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com.
All right. And that's it. I guess we're ready to go.
We're ready to dive in.
We may as well start.
Jump in.
Because we had a lot to listen to this week. The first thing we're going to talk about...
I don't think we need to talk about it in too much detail on this one, no. But
no, we don't. But I want to kind of talk up some of this a little, Anyway, this is a new recording. The first classical music record we're going to listen to is a new recording of the complete Sibelius Symphonies. That's about 4 hours of music. So I actually started listening to this more than a month ago. And even then it was kind of hard because before we get into let me tell you what this is first. It's Sibelius Complete Symphonies by the Oslo Philharmonic and this very young Finnish conductor named Klaus Mäkelä. He's 26 years old, and he was just appointed as the conductor for the Concertgebouw in Holland, in the Netherlands, we should call it now, I think. And that's a big appointment for such a young guy. So he's highly touted as this up-and-coming conductor. And this recording was released on Decca Records. Now, before we get into this, I just want to say, listening to like the entire symphonies of one composer, I have a friend, and he once told me he had downloaded the entire life works of the contemporary composer Arvo Pärt. Okay. And I found this horrifying in a way, like, because he has them all, and now he's going to listen to them all. And this guy's been composing for like probably 60 years now, or something, maybe 50 years. And there's a lot of music, and when he wrote it matters. So you kind of need some kind of context to be listening to this music, otherwise, because it isn't just like. This is the kind of thing that bugs me about, say retrospectives, or say you go to see like the complete paintings of Monet at some museum or something like that. And the thing is, at an exhibit, they'll sort of organize them in a certain way so that you get some sort of narrative out of it. But if you're just randomly listening to pieces by this point, they're not. Classical works aren't really like like rock bands where you can just kind of listen to it. And well, unless you're like a scholar, you can't really just place it in its time. Right. And especially if it's a contemporary composer, because it's happening as we speak, you know. A guy like Arvo Pärt, we think of him as with his very deep, still, his tintinnabuli style, his spiritual music. But he started out as a pretty harsh-sounding composer back in his Symphony No. 2, Symphony No. 1 days in the 60s and 70s. So it's kind of helpful to know when a lot of these pieces were written. And it just takes time, because Sibelius' symphonies are big, they're big bone, they're heavy, and just to hear all of them back to back is too much. So I spaced them out over the course of over a month, and I was also kind of busy, so I couldn't listen to them all the time anyway, because we were still doing other recordings for the podcast that we wanted to talk about while I was listening to this. So this week I did the most of the listening. Okay, so Klaus Mäkelä, conductor. He's 26. He's highly touted. He's got a big, bright future ahead of him. But this recording, I don't know. But it got great reviews. So I was really excited to hear this, actually. I was like, oh, this is going to be great to go through these Sibelius Sisters, which both of us love, by the way. I remember many nights at your place listening to the Second Symphony, our personal favorite one, I think, and just the fantastic brass sections of that we love so much. And, so we were really excited to hear this. You know, it's always great to talk about Sibelius. But I thought this recording, all of these works, left something to be desired, some more than others. Anyway, let's get down to it. Symphony No. 1 in E minor. Okay. All of these recordings were made in the Concertos in Oslo, Norway. Excuse me. And let's get to work here. Anyway, the first symphony, Andante ma non troppo allegro energico, it has an introduction. It starts with a famous drum roll and flute solo. The flute gets a little more solo time if the tims drop out. There's a pause. The flute, right away, I noticed, has a lot of room ambience on it. So I'm thinking, oh, this was recorded pretty far away. They must be afraid that the orchestra is going to come in and really just be this dynamic force. But it sounded like this was recorded in a large, empty hall. And the solo was slowly taken, which makes the surging entry of the orchestra really powerful. That was nice. Big contrast in speed. This is a pretty fast movement, and the way he takes it. And that's not going to be the case with a lot of the other symphonies. He generally takes the later ones much more slowly. Yeah, the timpani and strings don't register as well as the brass do, and they sound a bit cloudy, in fact. The percussion don't impact on this particular work. That's not true of the rest of the works, but in this particular work, it was recorded on its own. I checked, and it just doesn't sound so great. I was just listening to this, thinking of my old Colin Davis conducting the London Symphony Orchestra recording on RCA. Those were made in the late 90s and the 2000s, and they sounded spectacular. And I wasn't getting that kind of impact here. Here, the timpani and the percussion sounds kind of like distant thunder. This particular work has terrific energy, though, and the brass playing sound really good. Quiet passages are well picked up. The harp accompaniment in the second theme is very crisp sounding. Thematic material is sharply etched as far as rhythm goes, but when the louder passages return, a lot of detail is lost in a rather muddy overall sound. Did you think so, by the way, with this?
I didn't find it has great clarity, and I also thought the sound stage is not great. In other words, the sound is not multidimensional. I didn't get a sense of space from these recordings.
Right.
It sounds rather flat to me.
The
generally clear, not
average,
particularly detailed. And as you were saying, when you told me we were going to do these, I started playing them in the background on my smaller system, just to get the general, just how are the tempos and the interpretations going to compare to the other recordings I have. And I thought, okay, they're a little bit different. So I'll get some, sort of focused listening when we get closer to it. So this week I listened to 2 of these every night on my big system, and I was waiting to be, wowed and knocked back, like you said, when we used to listen to the other ones, and I wasn't. Yeah. So I was like, let me check all the controls. Do I have everything set flat? Is there something going? No, I just, the overall sound impression was sort of muted.
It does improve a bit on other symphonies on the set, but this
a little bit,
yeah. But it never really gets really, really good. So
I was kind of mystified with the rave reviews of the performances and the recording.
Well, the performance of this particular symphony, I thought, was really good. It's just kind of let down by the. It doesn't really impact because of the sound, the way it really should. I thought, there's a great climax at the end of this first movement. The pizzicati at the end and the lower end don't register fully. Okay, on to the second movement, taken slowly, really nice, well-shaped lines, muddiness and lack of detail in the strings again. That really drove me crazy. All right, there are 7 of these symphonies. I'm going to go through these pretty quick because it's not, and give you like a general overview. In the scherzo movement, the third movement, the thump and the timpani that open this movement betray the cloudiness at the lower end of the recording again. I do like the way Mäkelä lets us hear the accompaniment as well as the thematic material. He's got a good balance in the way he balances this. I think he really likes this particular work, the first symphony, a lot because he seems to really conduct it with a bit of passion. He especially accents the tuba or very low brass. And the timpani and the third movement sound like they're in another room, unfortunately. So that doesn't work too well. The finale, this comes in well. There's the fuzz of the brass sound is slightly muted by the recording. Winds all sound clear. Higher instruments register well. The pacing of the movement is very swift. And I do like the original way Mäkelä presents string accents with this kind of swashbuckling verb. See, because I'm an English teacher, and that word is just, I say that word every day. Verve, like the jazz record label.
The record label,
yeah. This is a well-realized performance. I like that a lot, but the recording lets it down. So I said at the end, beautifully realized performance marred by a muddy recording at the low end. Too much space between the mic and the orchestra, or the space is too big and the low end sound is getting lost. Okay, Symphony number 2, my personal favorite. I like this, and I like number 5 the best. Those are the ones that I really gravitate towards. This one sounds better. The strings come in clearly. It's nicely phrased. Woodwind themed dances as the brass resonate well. The bass seems clearer in this particular work. Lovely opening. I thought this was one of the better, probably the best performance on the entire album, really. Which is a relief because it's also my favorite of the symphonies. Right. Judging by the reverberation at the strings, the room is a bit smaller, or they've done something to improve the sound. Mäkelä takes a slowish, deliberate tempo in this first movement of the second symphony. Quiet parts are beautifully quiet yet audible, and he has the patience to pace himself so that once climaxes arrive, they have an impact, which is impressive for a very young conductor like him. It sounds like he's thought about this a bit. I like the way the pulsing strings come across at the 6-minute 30-second point. The recapitulation comes feeling like an arrival, which is nice. Good structural communication happening. Second movement with the very famous pizzicati opening starts with a timpani roll and the pizzicati theme that sounds like a bass line. Very, very quiet on this recording, but comes across with presence. It's slow and deliberate, and that's okay here, but as we go through the symphonies, he's going to take a lot of these movements a little too slow, and it's going to start getting on my nerves. But right here, I'm accepting it. Maybe I had to listen to them all, individually, which I kind of did, but I was still remembering the other ones. The theme appears in the winds, and strings finally take over. This is a beautifully shaped movement, really. Let's see. I love the sudden bursts of warmth in this movement and the piece, and that this whole piece altogether offers. And then I go into this analysis, which I'm going to skip here because we got to get through these. Third movement, vivacissimo, rushing strings taken at a good pace. The timpani accents register well. There's some chest cavity resonating sound there. I approve of that. At 1 minute and 45 seconds, the B section on this ternary form movement starts. It's a pastoral theme with reedy winds carrying the main melodic material. And we get the rushing strings again at 3 minutes and the pastoral winds again at 4 minutes and 50 seconds. This leads to a climax that arrives by spilling into the fourth movement. Always a magical moment, as it is in this performance, too. The pulsing bass create a roiling sense, and I've always loved the brass fanfare that we hear just after the opening string theme. It doesn't have the presence here that it has in Colin Davis's recording, but it's very good. More of a piece with the overall texture than something that stands out for its own spectacularness or spectacularity, whatever that word would be. A lot of tension is built up to this point, and this movement has to release it all, and does so in stages, making the listener feel like he's being transported to higher realms as it goes. The piece already sounds like it's releasing tension at 3 minutes and 30 seconds in this particular recording. I want to get to the end. The melodic material repeats at the end, but the momentum of the accompanying strings won't let it settle into a strong cadence. The orchestra gathers steam, repeating the theme in different sections, and then a slow crescendo begins. And I thought Mäkelä conducted the ending of this very maturely. There's a nice shift to a new key at the 12-minute mark. The cadential material gets suspended. We hear the pizzicati bass again from the second movement, and the strings play a tremolo figure in the heavenly ending cadence. The rest of the orchestra builds up, and we finally get the final solid climax, which is not so emphatically played. So the sound on this is more focused, bass impacts. It's a good performance that I'll probably return to, but I still like Colin Davis better, as well as Simon Rattle and the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, and the Osmowanska and the Lati Symphony Orchestra. Those are my three favorite recordings of these works. I want to mention, this is Symphony number 2 is probably the best realized performance and recording on this album. I think it's all downhill from here.
I was a little disappointed in the third movement with the low bass sort of dips that they don't really scoop enough, and they should really like come down and scoop you up and bring them in. And I actually thought, compared to some of the other tempos on this album, this one it actually seems to rush a bit, and I would actually like him to have milked that sort of brass climax a little bit more, especially because, as you said, it goes into the fourth movement with the fanfare. But the part before that, I just wanted a little bit more sort of enjoyment and drawing out of that in the interpretation. But that was the only part of the performance of all the works, all the movements in this work that I didn't really feel satisfied by.
Yeah. Again, I want to repeat, this guy's 26 years old, and I thought they should have had him do, maybe 2 of these instead of like doing the entire 7, a set of the entire 7 of them. Well, it just sounds like it's too much.
I think I mentioned to you too, like you said, the first work was done on its own or separate, and then they did the rest of them. But it's got to be a big task if they've done these in succession.
They were all done the same, I think, within the same month.
Yeah.
That's a lot of, because these are big works that you really need to think about. And I don't know, I thought that was just way too much.
Maybe they were saving up, not letting out too much for each one, knowing that, there was a lot more to come. I don't know.
Yeah, or they figured, it was like, what do you call it, lockdown or like the coronavirus times, and they just had all this time and decided, hey, let's just record them all.
Yeah.
But it does kind of sound sometimes like they're kind of just marking time in a lot of these, and that's really sad because these are pretty spectacular works.
Well, as you say, the first 2 are 2 of my favorites and ones that I play the most, and then I realized why I don't listen to the 3 and 4 so much.
Well, the first 3 are very romantic, so 3 would kind of be of a piece with the first 3, and then the last 4 are kind of a little more modernist. But the 5th I really love. It kind of
the 5th is a good one, yeah.
It's a bit of it's got this kind of sort of spiritual theme to it. I actually read about that one, so I kind of know a bit about it.
I think 3 needs also more brass, though. Like, that's what I wrote in my comments. That's why I don't listen to this one all the time, because after 1 and 2, I wondered if I skipped a movement, because where did all the brass go?
Yeah, it's also kind of minimalist. Like, the chords don't change all that much in the fifth. It kind of sticks on the same chord for a long time, and you just get all this kind of running sort of rhythms. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. First, Symphony number 3, taken at a fast speed, almost upbeat. I do like the way the sound blooms in this when the rest of the orchestra comes in at this speed. The first thing comes out is inviting and cheerful, and that's kind of a realization of this piece that I hadn't had before. I never thought of this as a cheerful opening. Good orchestral detail, and I'm happy about the bass sound on this one too. All right, second theme, lonely and searching, and the movement chugs along at a good, lively pace. Nice sense of timing in the pauses, and the quiet moments are really quiet, and you won't want to listen to this in a car. Let's just say that. You'll miss a lot of stuff, get a lot of road noise, because there are classical works that are great to listen to in a car, like any orchestral Baroque work is great because it's always sounding, or some big Beethoven symphony. Not this particular performance anyway. Woodwinds come across as bird-like, and the timbres of the individual woodwind instruments register vividly. I said here an excellent realization and recording, though not as big-boned as Davis's, and I prefer the big-boned approach. But that's taste. I won't fault him for that. I feel like the timpani at the 5-minute mark could have registered more, 5-minute and 40-second mark, could have registered more vividly. They're a bit recessed, perhaps because Mäkelä hears them as more of an orchestral texture than an impact-making gesture. I feel like definition is being lost on crescendos, and this sounds like a fault of the recording again. The whole mass of sound blurs together, and it's not bad or dissatisfying, but it just drew my attention, and that's kind of a bit of a warning sign. I still enjoyed this movement. Going on to the second movement, this is really more of a theme and variations. Very quiet brass and quietly thumping pizzicati in the basses begin the movement. The winds take the famous woodwind theme slowly, more slowly than I'm familiar with, and in complete contrast to the first movement. I like the way the bass pizzicati really thump out of the speakers in this. The melodic theme glides gently in the strings at the 3-minute mark. Mäkelä doesn't always highlight the melodic theme, knowing we'll be listening for it. Instead, he draws out some of the orchestration, as he does after the 3-minute and 30-second mark. At around the 6-minute mark, the very high variation on the theme and the woodwinds may be too slow. Kind of, I felt like the bicycle teetering and threatening to fall over because it's not moving fast enough. Although these days people just stand on bicycles and they don't fall over. So anyway, it steadies when the low string pizzicati start accompanying. And there's a lot of wind arabesques. The very last variation ends with a very slow resolution. Beautiful, sensitive playing, maybe a bit slow, but it's successful. I'll give him that. Moderato, third movement. This starts by recalling the first two movements' themes in a wispy fashion and then comes to focus very gradually as a 6/8 time dotted rhythm. And the dotted rhythm is going to generate a lot of the material and is the focus of the movement rather than any melody. It changes, time signature a few times. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds, we get something to hold on to in the strings, no longer in 6/8, but in 4/4. It's a regal theme. I like the bass accompaniment to the theme at around the 6-minute 10-second mark, which Mäkelä draws out enough for you to notice it. Orchestral detail is kept close to the foreground in the next section, and the theme and the lower instruments also are kept close to the foreground. The rhythm straightens out gradually. It's always audible as the thematic material heads to the brass. The rhythm chugs to the end of the movement when we get a big bone brass cadence. This is a pretty compelling take of the Third Symphony that made me rethink it a bit. So far, I'm kind of a little disappointed by the sound, and Mäkelä is offering some alternative ways of thinking about this, and I'm like, this is pretty interesting. Then we get to Symphony 4, which is pretty much, I'd say, the most difficult one because it's sort of dark. And I think Mäkelä loses a bit of interest here. I think he likes the more romantic symphonies more, and that makes me feel like he should have only recorded those. The Fourth Symphony starts with a good throaty bass sound and decrescendos down to a barely audible sound. This is fairly slow and a glacially moving tempo for this icy cold movement. We hear muted brass at 2 minutes and 50 seconds, but only faintly. They come in full body to 3 minutes and 15 seconds, sounding great. The violins sound a bit disembodied, not grounded, when the lower strings aren't involved, like they're sort of like in the stratosphere somewhere, getting lost in the air of the room. They're blending too much with the room reverb, is what I want to say there. The natural reverb of the room. At 4 minutes and 45 seconds, there's a warm melody in the low strings that comes up sounding solid and bassy. Pizzicati in the bass register percussively despite their quietness. Let's see. The engineer found a good balance for this piece, I thought. This movement stays slow in tempo and ends quietly. Sounds registers nicely. Second movement, upbeat and woodsy with tremolo strings accompanying. I'm enjoying the bass presence at this point, and we're finally hearing woodwinds too, often responsible for the woodland evocations that Sibelius' music so often brings. The movement, like the previous one, sounds a bit slow, which allows us to luxuriate more in the tone, you would think, but if it keeps happening, you kind of want it to start moving a bit. Let's see. The movement ends suddenly on an interrupted string line and a very light hit on the timpani. The third movement is tempo largo. The slow movement starts with a woodwind melody underlined by string harmony. The tempo comes across as glacial again, but not so slowly that the musical line is lost. But there is the risk of that happening. Mäkelä always does have this musical line in mind, though, so he's thinking of the structure. The harmony and voice leading are easy to contemplate in that case, and there are some nice harmonic details in the various passages. I like the pulsing effect and the accompanying strings at the end of the movement. Fourth movement, allegro. A lot of contrapuntal passages in the whole symphony, and this starts with one of them in the strings. There's some metal percussion in this, heard for the first time. Rushing strings at a minute and 8 seconds, which anticipates the last movement of the Fifth Symphony. There's a transition at 2 minutes and 33 seconds to a ticking rhythm in the strings, marking time back and forth, kind of like a pendulum, I kind of thought of. A string melody plays along with it. Metal chiming percussion adds to the climaxes. We get pizzicati being handed around the string section on the two notes used in the ticking rhythm, and it all eventually ends in the ending chords playing emphatically on a warm-sounding but forbidding strings. Again, this isn't one of my favorite of Sibelius' symphonies. It really needs a good conductor to put it across. And we've got a good conductor here, but we need a great... Yeah, he may very well be a great one, a future great one, but you need someone, I think, with a bit more experience for this piece. I listened to this with more patience and attention in this recording than I ever had before, probably because I knew I was going to talk about it on this program, but it comes across as cold, which is intended, I guess, and good recorded sound, performance on the slow side that nevertheless registers powerfully and forbiddingly. All right, my other favorite of the Sibelius symphonies, number 5. The opening grand, spacious wind section is taken magnificently in the opening of the first movement, giving a sense of grandeur. The wind melodies are heard clearly to be extending each time they repeat to the false cadence at about 56 seconds. There are a lot of missed climaxes in this movement, meaning that they're written into the score that way, building up a lot of tension. The tempo here feels deliberate, not free, but metrical, and that's not good, because it kind of sounds like more like beating time, and I think that hurts this particular performance. I thought at this point I was saying, okay, this is going to be part of his interpretation. Let's see where he takes it. Instead of cadences, we get this rocking motion that's going to pay off in the third movement. The build-up is beautifully detailed. The build-up to this rocking sort of rhythm, the build-up to the cadence that we don't get, that leads to a sort of a rocking rhythm, is beautifully detailed but leaves it a little behind in drama. The tempo seems to slow a bit in this next section, leading to the build-up to the next missed cadence. Again, a smooth, almost legato approach to the missed climax at around 5 minutes and 10 seconds. And the rocking figure is a bit blurred here, which I didn't like. I like that to be clear. I think everyone would, really. The bass registers really well in this recording. The tempo seems too slow for this quiet searching material that gains energy at 6 minutes and 25 seconds. I thought at this point the movement is lacking in drama and sense of forward motion. You don't have a lot of harmony going on in this movement, and so it needs a kind of momentum, a sort of forward motion, like a rhythmic, like sort of impetus. And I'm not getting that urgency that's required here. And I think that's going to hurt this performance as a whole. Mäkelä seems more interested in exploring the combinations of instruments used in the orchestration, which are interesting, and drawing those out. But I don't think that's what really this particular piece is about. We finally manage a slow approach to a cadence at 8 minutes and 35 seconds. And though it has been snuck up on, it comes across grandly, like the opening of the symphony. And Mäkelä sticks with the broad image as the material speeds up. This section releases some of the enormous tension, and the trick in the symphony is to release all the tension by the end of the third movement. Mäkelä smears the orchestral sounds here, though they lighten up at 9 minutes and 15 seconds for the rushing material. Again, I mentioned this sounds too slow to have the joyful feeling that I think it's supposed to have, because it's like it's suddenly free in a way. It's reached some kind of climax. This apparently isn't what Mäkelä is after in this, so I'm being patient here. String figures sound too mechanical to me, too deliberate at 12 minutes and 30 seconds. You can check it out there. Mäkelä manages a winding sound when the thematic material comes in. There's a speeding up at 13 minutes 34 seconds, and we burst out of the previous torpor to something grandly stated by brass. I'm not getting a sense of the beating timpani in the quieter sections. That's what's really driving the rhythm forward. At the end, they register well, though. The movement doesn't end with the bang that it can end with, and does end with on the Colin Davis recording, which is probably my favorite one. Although I do like the Vanska one, too, with the Lahti Symphony. I should mention Vanska has recorded these, Osmo Vanska has recorded these symphonies twice, once with the Lahti Symphony Orchestra, which is a set that made his name as a conductor, and then he re-recorded them with the Minnesota Symphony Orchestra, which has the benefit of being on BIS SACD. And they're good performances, but the Lahti ones are very special, so I would recommend those. Anyway, second movement, Andante mosso quasi allegretto. This opens also slowly, and unfortunately, that's what we're going to get in the rest of the works on this album. And we still have like an entire CD to go after this. It's almost like they ran out of steam at this point, and he spends a lot of time beating time. This movement is a set of variations that are nevertheless headed somewhere. The theme is what varies as it tries different approaches to the material. It's almost like this movement is trying to like find some combination. It's trying to crack a safe. It's, so that they can get at some secret. That's the way I kind of hear it. A wind chord in the accompaniment is accented between 30 seconds and 1 minute. I had never noticed it in the score before. The theme gets, so that was nice. The theme gets something stronger together when it's played as a chorale harmony at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, gains momentum and starts moving. We keep hearing this brass warning emerging. The first time is at 4 minutes to 4 minutes and 12 seconds, and that slows the movement of the thematic material down. Sort of like it's flagging the theme down to say no entry. It's kind of like the police telling you can't come in here. A pizzicato approach is then tried at 5 minutes. The theme gains playfulness and energy at 6 minutes, and you can hear a single brass note arising in the background, warning it off again. Something more flowery, warm, and romantic emerges at 6 minutes and 40 seconds. The brass tone builds to a full statement at 7 minutes and 15 seconds. We hear it dominate up to 7 minutes and 38 seconds or so. The pizzicato strings then play quietly. And then we hear the forlorn romantic string version of the theme play at the end, accompanied by a wall of brass harmony that won't allow it through. The movement ends without resolution, but goes without much pause into the third movement. This is a very famous transition. Sort of like in Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. You go in directly into the third movement. The music here starts rushing at a comfortably fast speed, necessary for this. The articulation is very clear. It's a bit slow. At 1 minute and 20 seconds, we hear the grand arrival of the rocking theme, which is now that we heard in the first movement, but now it's circling. It's complete. That we heard in the first movement. There's a lovely wind melody rather low in the texture at 1 minute and 45 seconds that could register more strongly. Then at the 2 minute and 10 second mark, we get an even warmer statement of the circling theme, with strings in the accompaniment rather loud. The quiet rushing strings at 3 minutes and 50 seconds are rather intriguing on this recording. They're very quiet, but again, they're sort of measured. They don't quite rush the way this really needs to, sort of like it's like an element of nature, maybe like water or wind through the trees. The circling theme in the lower strings at around 4 minutes and 40 seconds registers very clearly. I feel at this point, though, momentum has been lost, and it's very important for this movement and work in general. The rhythm really has to carry this work. There has to be a constant forward motion. There's a nice false cadence at 6 minutes and 20 seconds. From there, a buildup of tension begins when the circling theme comes back in the brass. It's still pretty slow. There's a magical part where the brass circling theme starts widening its harmony until at the end we're left with the opportunity to reach the cadential climax we weren't allowed to hear at the beginning of the first movement, because it got interrupted. It's approached cautiously in the composition, like the protagonist of the work can't believe it's going to happen, and we finally get those last widely spaced out chords. They're very famous. There's like a pause between each one, as though he wants to be really careful and make sure the cadence happens, because it didn't happen in the first movement. Give us the final long sought cadence that we didn't hear in the first movement. Mäkelä conducts these last chords in line with the tempo he's used throughout the movement. They register well, but one doesn't have a great sense of arrival one can get from a great performance. Again, I want to go back to Davis, Rattle, and Vanska with the Lahti Symphony. Symphony number 6, another kind of tough one for me. This one is it's not like sumptuously orchestrated, so it's kind of like but it's kind of lean, let's say. So it's kind of, you have to change our expectations a little for this. It's very string heavy, begins with a haunting string melody, romantic sounding. The opening material is beautiful and rather churchy sounding, like a hymn. And some winds start peaking in at around the 1 minute and 30 second mark. Good full-bodied sound, which we hear when we hear the first timpani at around 1 minute and 50 seconds. Mäkelä is giving this a floating, pleading sort of quality. The brass make an appearance at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. We get some of the rushing type of figuration we heard at the end of the Fifth Symphony's first movement, sounding a bit fleeter here. And we get locked into a repeating figure at the 4 minute and 30 second mark. Now, when you get something like this, the conductor has to do something to keep it interesting, because it just keeps circling around and repeating. But it rather starts to lose interest in the straightforward way Mäkelä presents it. He doesn't really do anything to make it interesting, or just kind of show you, oh, we're stuck. You know, you got to get this sense of being stuck or something, because the music can't move at this point. But Sibelius maybe put a little bit of tension in it, you know, somehow. But Sibelius himself comes to the rescue with the orchestration that fades in and out. I'm starting to get a sense here that Mäkelä will mark time when he's not inspired. But I don't want to damn this performance. It's pretty good. It gets a bit of warmth when we hear the low strings in the 6th minute. There's some lovely soaring material in the 7th minute to about 7 minutes and 30 seconds where it dissipates. Nice brass at 7 minutes and 45 seconds onwards. It registers nicely, but without force from the speakers. It's more mere sound than impact, but the movement ends solidly. Second movement, Allegretto Moderato, opens with the winds. Again, the tempo sounds rather slow. Like I said, this is going to be a problem for the rest of the album. Mäkelä is reveling in the harmony rather than the line here, though there's a sense of the line. He's always thinking of that. He marks time in this. There are some pretty great harmonic and orchestrative moments in this movement, like the swells in the 3rd minute that lead to the forward movement in the chugging strings. But again, those chugging strings are marked time, and we don't get that sense of thrust that moves this music forward. In Sibelius's later symphonies especially, this kind of rhythmic momentum is really important. It's also necessary in the second symphony and works like that, but not as much. It's not carrying that symphony. Here it is. Listen to the 5-minute mark. These repeating string figures sound just like that. Repeating string figures. They need energy. They need spark. They don't have them in this performance. As a result, the wind figures that the strings accompany don't get a sense of being spun out of the texture. Another nice inconclusive ending, though. It's almost kind of like this. The strings are kind of like sort of rotating, like, and they're gaining momentum, and something comes out of them. It's sort of born from them, but you don't really get that sense here because there's no real momentum that's going to make that thing happen. Anyway, let's move on. Third movement. The opening figure is all appoggiaturas. The material that follows has got a kind of water spray quality to it. Mäkelä marks each one of the appoggiatura notes. I don't know if they're appoggiatura. I'm calling them appoggiatura. They're kind of like a grace note sort of thing, which comes back after a minute. Again, marking time in the second minute. This is getting rather predictable. It takes the tension away. If I had to guess, either this was recorded late in the day or Mäkelä isn't really inspired by this symphony. This is the sixth. Fourth movement, easily memorable opening string theme. Sounds hymn-like with its full close at the end of the phrase on the tonic. It's reassuring. This is the warmest movement of the symphony. Mäkelä manages to get some excitement going here. He's obviously inspired by this movement. It's conducted at the tempo familiar to me and has a bit of, from other recordings, and has a bit of spring to the string figures at the end of the third and beginning of the fourth minutes. In the repeating bass figure at 5 minutes and 31 seconds, you can hear the propulsion I've been missing in the rest of the work. By the 7th minute, when we're hearing the opening string theme repeated with chugging strings beneath it, we've got something appealing going. The rhythm dissipates and we're in a warm, romantic-sounding hymn-like section at 8 minutes and 20 seconds or so. Soft, touching ending in the strings. Okay, so Mäkelä finds his footing in this work in the fourth movement. That's a little too late, I would say. I feel like the first three movements lacked inspiration, though they're well enough executed and balanced. Sound is good throughout, warm where it needs to be, well detailed. Okay, the spectacular and very powerful Seventh Symphony. This is a one-movement work that it's a continuous work that has all four movements compressed into 20 minutes without stopping. And I don't know much about this work. It's something I really want to know more about. I need to read about it or something, but I haven't found any kind of monographs that talk about it in detail. Anyway, it's supposed to be really powerful, and this performance is not powerful. Let's just say that. All right, ominous opening, which is great, with gentle timpani taps giving way to a rising figure. We get woodwinds at 1 minute, nicely shaped, but Mäkelä prefers slow tempos here. That might help in this work where musical events build quickly. A tender theme emerges just before the 3-minute mark. This theme could soar a bit more. It's nicely shaped and has got a bit of warmth to it. There's already a big climax at 5 minutes and 30 seconds, but I'm sorry, so much is missing from this. There's majesty written into the material, and it registers, but there could be so much more. I just feel like this performance isn't reaching the peak that it could reach. Other recordings do reach that peak. Again, Davis, Rattle, Vanska. This is too prosaic, not monumental enough. The music gets playful after this. It's too measured to dance. Good sound quality, though. Second movement, Vivacissimo, and then Adagio. This is continue. This is really isn't really a second movement. It's just sort of a second section. The music just continues. It's marked Vivacissimo for the beginning part, but he's not even playing this vivace. He's much slower than that. Again, too deliberate and metronomic, an issue I've had with the Sixth Symphony especially, but a few other works on this set. The music starts moving at a good energetic speed at the end before giving the baton to the next section. The third movement, Allegro molto moderato, has a slower 3/4 theme, very much in the Sibelian woodland conjuring idiom. Again, I'm calling this the third movement because it's a separate track, but it's really still the same continuous work. Good tension is built up by the 2 minute and 20 second mark of this section. The music maintains good momentum and builds well to the end of the section. And then the fourth, shall we call it, movement, Vivace, Presto Adagio. We leap into this final section with the lead up to the big boned theme at 1 minute and 10 seconds as the culmination of the buildup of tension. We get to the string themes just before 3 minutes. They sound fairly dramatic. They fade. We get the gentle woodwind themes at 3 minutes and 45 seconds, which builds up to the powerful ending, but it's not as powerful as I'd like. I'm disappointed by this, really. I wasn't gripped by this particular symphony, as I should be. I listened to events unfold without much involvement. This should be a powerful work in its compactness, but the juggernaut quality it conjures just isn't present on this recording. I thought this was a total miss, really. Next comes Tapiola, which is a tone poem. It's been a real favorite of contemporary conductors. Sibelius has he composed a lot of tone poems, but contemporary conductors tend to be choosing this one a lot. This is the last tone poem, or orchestra work, perhaps even, that Sibelius wrote in 1926. And then he went into a long 30-year retirement where he didn't write anything else. One of the big mysteries of classical music history. You know, I guess he felt like his style, he'd reached the end of where he wanted to go, and music was changing too much for him to really want to go into some of the areas where it was being taken, is what people say. Okay, the work portrays Tapio, the forest spirit mentioned throughout the Kalevala. And the tone poem, it's not really a story. It evokes the Finnish woods with its desolate landscapes, icy ruggedness, and the strange play of light through the trees, I guess, in the mountains. It has an eternal quality of myth and really follows the Seventh Symphony in its compositional style. It starts the same way with a timpani roll, louder than the symphony. There's a lovely repeating figure in the strings in the second minute as the winds intone deep chords under it. It sounds like pulsing invisible life in the landscape being evoked. It's pretty magical. But Mäkelä isn't doing much to color this any more than the score does. He's really relying on the score to do the work for him. And it does, I guess, enough, but I feel like the conductor can inject a bit more. He's not evoking much, just showing us the orchestration. And in this case, I wanted to hear Osmo Vanska and the Lahti Symphony Orchestra's interpretation. There are evocative colors from the orchestra, and particularly the low reed instrument, which has a bit of growl to it. There's a nice orchestral detail registering in the 7th minute. Timpani register powerfully on the recording just before the 7th minute. We get some mystery out of the strings at 9 minutes and 30 seconds and onwards. This section comes to an abrupt end with a timpani crash at around 11 minutes and 30 seconds. The previous material intensifies in volume. At 15 minutes and 27 seconds, the volume suddenly lowers to very quiet string figuration, which quickly crescendo into a harmony that must have stretched boundaries of what was happening at the time in tonal music at the 16-minute mark. The sound here is eerie. There's a commanding timpani and brass motif, and the eerie music drops out. I'm thinking we must be in the deep forest at this point, at 17 minutes and 30 seconds, with the eerie, odd harmonies. They wind down to a comfortable tonality, and the set of chords prepares us for the final cadence, which follows a quick crescendo and decrescendo. Again, I'm missing any sense of what Aristotle called telos, or an arrival, like the sense that there's a place where this work is going. Sibelius certainly thought of that and composed it that way, but I didn't get a sense of arrival from this particular performance. It sort of drags on, though the eerie moments register well at the end. Okay, the last 3 tracks on this 4th CD are just fragments of a work that Sibelius was writing, and they're just kind of described by numbers. The first one is HUL 1325. It starts with a timpani hit. It's only about a minute long. It's just atmospheric, really. I don't have a way to describe this. It's a little reminiscent of Tapiola. Perhaps Sibelius was intending to work this material a different way, but we don't know. It's just sitting by itself. HUL 1236/9 is 17 seconds. It's got like a dancey quality to it. And that's it. We don't really know where this was going to go. So it's just weird. These kind of things are just disembodied. And the last one, 13-minute HUL 1327/2, that really catchy title. It also marked Allegro moderato, this one. Starts with a droning bass woodwind with a woodwind harmony sounding above it. Pizzicato strings follow and play alone. When they stop, the long-held bass note returns in a higher register. The woodwinds reveal more of the idea, and it ends on a tonic, which is interesting. But it's an odd ending to this set of symphonies. It's kind of an anticlimactic ending to this entire album. Sibelius symphonies, in summary, let's just summarize. Sibelius symphonies can be really exciting, but you don't get too much of a sense of that quality from these performances. Like if I'm a big classical music enthusiast, and people are always wanting me to, because I teach about it too, people are always wanting me to recommend works to them. Oh, tell me a work to listen to. And if I recommend them a Sibelius symphony, I've got to tell them also which recording to listen to, because if they listen to this one, they'll say, oh, what's the big deal? It really does matter, the recording you listen to. You don't get too much of a sense of that quality, the exciting quality from these performances. A lot of them are conducted at tempos on the slow side, except for the first two, which are very good. And we mentioned the first one, Symphony 1, isn't really recorded very well on the low end. In the later symphonies, Mäkelä starts marking time quite a bit. And he doesn't really have the resources with his conducting yet. I would say it's a matter of experience to put this music over the top. Nevertheless, these are all well-shaped and balanced performances. There's really no issue with the conductor's ability here. He's probably deserving of his Concertgebouw appointment, and he's a promise. And the set of recordings puts the promising talent before the public. I found these performances reassuring in that they're going to be in good hands, but I'd still go back to the past for the performances I like best. I really wish he had recorded maybe only 2 of these and released that, and really had them, put a lot of work into them instead of just recording them all. So I would say this set it's average to good, and sometimes very good, but overall it's pretty disappointing.
Yeah, that's how I feel, because when I listen to symphonies, particularly romantic kind of things, and then moving on later, I'm looking for sort of dynamic things, and as a brass player, I always want that dynamic brass and some interpretation of that pushes me along. And so I have a lot of recordings of these two. I have Russian Philharmonic, and I forget what other ones. I have the Ashkenazi directed ones, and so I'm quite familiar with these, and I like 1, 2.
Those are even older than the Davis ones.
Yeah, but they're very dynamic and dramatic. Right. And 1, 2, and 5 are my favorite for the brass. And when I, after Beethoven, when I'm looking for these kind of, romantic and more modern symphonies with brass, then I go to Sibelius, and then our favorite Nielsen, and then Von Homburg, right?
Von Homburg. We got to introduce the public to Von Homburg, but I wish they'd re-record those symphonies so we can kind of get them on. I'd love to talk about those.
So maybe I came to this with just too much expectation, or hoping that they would be better or something, different above what I have, already heard. But they're not bad in any way. They're competent, but just I feel like the interpretation doesn't add much extra, or is lacking in some areas of where things could have lifted or been emphasized to bring something new to them. And so I felt, just kind of uninspired at the end of some of them, especially the
later ones.
Yeah, the later ones. And they're not bad. But I also felt the overall sort of sonics of the recording also didn't help out getting things out that may have been more dynamic if they had just sort of jumped out of the dynamics of the recording. I don't want to say too much for such a young conductor, other than maybe this was too much to bite off at one set. Maybe you should have just done 2 of these and then come back to them other symphonies in a different recording project or something. So I don't know if that was his intention, that he wanted to do all these, or it was part of the new position or the recording company's idea. But I could have done with 2 of these done more focused in recording and also interpretation. But they're out there now, so let's see what he does.
In the future. I will keep an ear out for him, certainly, because I'm kind of curious to see where he's going to go.
I mean, if this is going to lead to more recordings of these, kind of Scandinavian recordings, I'll be happy, because I want to hear more of them and lesser known works as well. But as far as how these will stand up against previous performances, well, it's a tough comparison here. So
I want to say I read 2 different reviews of this, both from England, and they were just glowing reviews of this set, and it's just not that great, really. So I just want to say to listeners, I mean, they're pushing this conductor as the next big thing, and that's all well and fine. I mean, I'm sure they know, because they hear him live and things like that, so they can probably spot whether he has a real talent or not. But we're just going here by the recording, and I just want to say to our listeners, if you really want to know what a recording sounds like and we're reviewing it, listen to us. You don't even have to believe us. We're telling you what points to listen to, like when we mention our thing, so you can actually go to the recording and hear it yourself, because we've and see if you agree with us or not. So I think we're in a good place for that.
Well, we have
you want to be listening to the Adult Music Podcast, and you are.
We're not getting compensated for our views either way, so you get unbiased.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. Yeah. If people don't like us, it's not like anything bad's going to happen. We're not being paid now. So.
It could just be that we're old enough to have listened to recordings that some of these other reviewers haven't listened to. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I know a lot of the. I didn't read the Gramophone review for this. I don't know what they said, but they have a lot of reviewers that have been there forever. So I think they I think they'll kind of have a good ear for it. But I don't know what happens at these magazines. Are they told you have to give this a good review or something? I mean, we really don't know.
Yeah, who knows how it works.
Okay, I can't believe that we're just about an hour into the podcast and I finished that entire 4-disc set. There are other albums that I've talked about for an entire hour.
Yeah.
But we squeezed it all in. Okay, now we have a trumpet theme this week. So we had Sibelius brass. And the next recording is Shostakovich. I'm going to do jazz and variety. And this has a lot of brass on it, too, as well as a lot of other things. Right. One of the things about reviewing like the Sibelius Symphonies is they're works that I really love. So I'm highly, highly opinionated about them.
Yeah.
I know more or less what I want to hear. Now, I'm not saying, the conductor can, kind of make me hear the work in a new way, as Mäkelä actually did in the Third Symphony. But if certain things aren't going to happen, I'm not going to like it, basically. So that's what happens. Exactly. Not the case here. Shostakovich, this is light music that he wrote. This is called Jazz and Variety. Yeah.
This was fun. It was another side of Shostakovich, where the material and rhythms are very light, but he still slaps you with that weird harmony that he's so good at. And I found it kind of enjoyable.
And also that sense of irony, too.
Yeah.
They found a way to kind of express irony in music via popular song, him and Mahler and a few others, too.
Yeah.
Anyway, this album is called Jazz and Variety. It's by the Singapore Symphony Orchestra. Oh, who knew? Conducted by Andrew Litton, who really just goes globe-trotting and conducts everybody. Yeah. He does the Dallas Symphony, too. I know he's down there sometimes.
I always like his touch. He brings up really good things.
He does, and he's actually a great... I usually hear him in company of Stephen Huff, the pianist, who's actually a knight now. He's just been knighted by the Queen. He's now Sir Stephen Huff. And I really hate that. I can't call people sir.
Yes, sir.
This is such a British thing. You know what? And I'm just going to say it because we're American. British people aren't listening to this podcast. I don't know why.
Oh, there's some.
But I'm going to be obnoxious about it. Stop with the sirs. There are one or two.
I feel
but
that
we have mostly an American audience.
Knighthood has almost become like the way they slap UNESCO ratings on sites. There's so many places that are UNESCO World Heritage that it doesn't have much meaning anymore, so anyway.
Yeah, but what bugs me about it is they give all these people who have contributed to British culture these kind of knighthoods, and meanwhile everybody else in the world is just like Joe Schmo doing their job.
That's right.
It just kind of weirds me out a little bit, I think. This next great work by this great composer whose name is just this. He's not a star. Yeah. Anyway. I don't know. Anyway, as with many composers of the 1920s and 1930s, Shostakovich combined popular and serious styles in his work, at least in the early days. By the way, I should mention this is on the Beasts label, and it's an SACD. Pretty interesting to have this in that high quality 96 kilohertz sampling rate sound. Okay, now the first three movements are the Suite for Jazz Orchestra number 1. There's another one, but we don't hear the number 2. Composed in 1934. This was composed just after the success of Shostakovich's opera Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk, which is a work that was a huge success for him. And then I think about a month later, he got castigated for it by the Soviet government, and it was like the beginning of his lifelong troubles with the Soviet government. This piece was written in response to a competition rather pointlessly aiming to elevate jazz above mere cafe and dance music. By the way, you need to know, when you hear the word jazz in this case, for Europeans and for Russians at the time, the word jazz was a term loosely used for all sorts of light music from the USA, not just what we would think of as jazz. Right. Okay, so waltzes, polkas, all of this sort of thing, this light music would be under the jazz umbrella in Eastern Europe and Russia. Okay, so we're not going to hear any actual jazz really in this
nothing
particular
swings
piece.
In this suite, I can tell you that.
No, there's no swing in this. Nothing in these movements can really be called jazz or elevating either, but it is fun. It's all fun.
They're fun, light fun.
The band is made up of 3 saxophones, 2 trumpets. So there you go. There's our trumpet theme. Mm-hmm. Trombone, banjo. Are you sitting down? Hawaiian guitar. Where'd he get one of those?
I don't know.
Piano percussion, violin, and double bass. I don't know. The Hawaiian guitar made its way into the Soviet Union somehow.
Did they have Russian spies in Hawaii at that time? I don't know. Wow.
Maybe. But this is the early days. This is before they really kind of started getting paranoid about everything.
Yeah.
So things were getting in. Okay, the first movement is a waltz, and it's an pa waltz. Okay, that's pretty nasal sounding muted trumpets, all right, and sax. It's fun. It's pretty comical. The orchestration is creative. I like the use of chiming percussion and the multiple voices on different melodies toward the end. So you get a little about that Shostakovich, the accomplished composer, in the counterpoint at the end of this really light work. Second movement, polka. A xylophone plays the theme. That's another. Is that a xylophone? I didn't mention a xylophone.
I think it is.
I don't know. Maybe it says percussion, so I guess the xylophone would count as the percussion here. It sounds like it's got that bony xylophone sound. The rhythm is pretty simple, so are the themes. Entertaining and fun. And the last movement is a foxtrot. I've always liked that name, the foxtrot,
Yeah, foxy
comes
ladies
on very,
and all that.
Yeah, those foxy ladies doing the foxtrot. This comes on very loud, not in line with the previous 2 tracks. It suddenly quietens to the straight foxtrot rhythm. And the inspiration here, as in the previous 2 movements, is in the orchestration, which is interesting. The themes are all pretty banal, probably purposely so. This is by far the longest movement of the suite at 3 minutes and 55 seconds. And this is where the Hawaiian guitar comes in, listen at 1 minute and 20 seconds. I really enjoyed that moment. It's such an odd sound to hear. There's a glissandoing trombone, that comedy turn. You get some of that. Chiming percussion in 3 minutes. A fun piece. All right, tracks 4 through 7. This is the suite from The Age of Gold, which was a ballet. Written in 1930, revised 1935. This is about the adventure, the ballet. The story of the ballet is about the adventures of a Soviet soccer team visiting the decadent West.
Ooh, decadent.
Shostakovich described the action as the Western European dances breathe the spirit of depraved eroticism,
wow,
which is characteristic of contemporary bourgeois culture.
If they could only see it now.
But I tried to imbue the Soviet dances with the wholesome elements of sport and physical culture. Yeah, I think the Nazis did that too.
Yeah.
It's really funny. Depravity, as we Americans know well, makes for more interesting music, which is the case here.
Sometimes. Sometimes only.
Well, I don't think there's interesting, wholesome music. It would be too predictable, really. All right, the introduction. It's all winds at the beginning. Adventurous writing, but appealing. The orchestra handles this well. The recorded sound is transparent, so all the voices are easily followable. There's often counterpoint happening for brief periods. And there's a straightforward 3/4 rhythm at about 1 minute and 45 seconds. A lot of quick changes of rhythmic profile. Some vulgar sliding trombone at 3 minutes. That has to be the Western people there. Decadent, vulgar. Can I just say, as speaking for the entire West, I'd just like to say, guilty as charged. Let me see. This is mostly a popular idiom. At 3 minutes and 45 seconds, we're in an pa rhythm, which has always seemed sort of vulgar to me. Dynamics on this recording are pretty huge when it gets loud. Yeah, the pa rhythm kind of sounds decadent to me. It just kind of sounds like too worn, you know? Like there's nothing new to do, so we're just going to do pa, you know? Second movement, Adagio. Quiet strings at the beginning, with the high wind instrument taking the lead on the melody. It's nicely shaped, as is the yearning of the accompanying strings. The oboe carries the melody for some time and has some expressive tones in his overall sound. A violin takes over and makes the melody more lyrical. The accompaniment warms up at 3 minutes and 40 seconds when the string section joins in. At 5 minutes and 20 seconds, we get a forte, and boy, does it register, especially in the bass end, where the timpani burst out of the speaker. The trumpet is played a bit outside the key area as the strings build to a climax at around 6 minutes and 30 seconds, and again at 6 minutes and 50 seconds. There's a rather plaintive flute solo toward the end, a nice movement, could be a standalone piece. Third movement, polka, as an allegretto. This is real early 20th century stuff. It's a square polka rhythm with xylophone playing an angular solo. The rhythm and thematic lines all sound mechanical. It's a gentle poke at popular music of the era. Shostakovich obviously liked music like this, but his sense of fun prevails here as he sets the line of rhythm in comic fashion. The Singapore Symphony characterized well here. The humor and occasional harshness come across. We hear a fragment of a popular tune at the end. Fourth movement, Dance Allegro. The opening of this sounds a bit like the return to the Shrovetide Fair in the fourth tableau of Stravinsky's Petrushka. Or is that the third tableau? It's the fourth tableau. Okay. That changes, though, as a lot of quick changes of rhythm and clever changes of timbre and harmony bring us to unpredictable places, as though we're on a wild ride. The Singapore Symphony and Litton are in good form here, and throughout this piece, fun stuff. I'm getting a sense that in Litton, Andrew Litton is really the driving force here, because it's popular music that he understands. I feel like the Singapore, they're kind of playing it sort of straight, but there are kind of elements in their playing that are kind of making it breathe better, and I really feel like that's Litton's conducting that's really kind of pushing.
Yeah, you'd have to understand what was going on in this time period, and
right.
It has to be a balance of sort of hokiness that's inherent in the material, but also the kind of fun spirit. And I feel the fun spirit comes out, and that must be at his, direction and pulling that out of the phrasing and tempos. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way. Okay, 8 through 12, tracks 8 through 12 is the suite from The Limpid Stream, 1935, and this was arranged as a suite in 1945. This was a ballet that takes place in the world of agriculture.
Ooh.
As all great ballets should, I guess.
Dancing over the cow patties, yeah.
Well, I think it wasn't about agriculture, but there was an Aaron Copland ballet. There's his rodeo, which that's not really an agriculture, but it's kind of the West.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's a bit of American culture there. Anyway, the world of agriculture, the score has more simple tunefulness than The Age of Gold does, because that one had to portray the decadent West. The scenario avoids conflict in its portrayal of a group of entertainers visiting an idyllic collective farm, which is the limpid stream of the title.
Sounds like a hippie commune in the 60s or something.
This reminds me of a lot of these old movies I've seen that kind of where idyllic life on in nature somewhere, and somebody starts murdering everybody eventually. I don't know. Anyway, that doesn't happen in the ballet. It's all idyllic. No. Anyway, the first movement is a waltz. It's got an um-pa-pa rhythm, waltzing strings. It's generic and schmaltzy. That's intentional. There's some nice chord changes. I like the clarinet that takes over the melody at about 20 seconds in. This is pretty standard light music, nicely orchestrated and arranged. Second movement, Russian popular dance. It's light and appealing. The Singapore Symphony, by the way, seems very delighted by this music, and it's all clean, smooth, enthusiastically played. The melodic material is played without subtlety, not much flexibility in the lines, but in music like this, there's not much need for it, so they sort of get away with it. And again, Litton draws out from them the sort of elements that really put this music across. It comes across well as what it is. Third movement is a gallop, big trumpet call at the beginning, followed by rushing string theme. This is played moderately with some excitement, but without much fire. It didn't give me chills, but it's fine. It's got a big ending. Fourth movement, Adagio, a rather pleading string opening, followed by a romantic cello theme. This is by far the longest movement of this suite at 7 minutes and 7 seconds. The other movements are all more than half as short. The cello is subtly accompanied by distant harp chords, which have a bit of a percussive thump to them, which I really enjoyed. There's a big Hollywood cadence at 3 minutes and 25 seconds. The cello continues afterwards with a new heartfelt melody, this time accompanied by glissandi on the harp. It settles down to a quieter melody with gentle harp accompaniment. And then finally, the fifth movement is pizzicato. It's got an appealing melody, all played pizzicato, very catchy and fun, and very short as well.
It's got a little Nutcracker suite quality to it. It's kind of nice. Okay. Okay. The tracks 13 through 20 are the Suite for Variety Orchestra. This was written in the 1950s. We don't know which year. Shostakovich compiled this suite from 3 film scores, a ballet movement, and 3 piano pieces. Wow. Yeah, a lot of... you want your music to live, you don't want to get lost. Yeah, I wrote this for a silent movie. Now it's part of my my orchestral suite. Variety suite.
Yeah, it's a good name for it, I guess.
It is, right. Yeah.
It's a variety of places it came from. All right, the first movement is a march, Giocoso alla marcia. This is a rather bombastic march opening. Standard stuff, well arranged, great sound on this recording right up front. Second movement, dance number 1. Rushing, almost Russian-sounding dance, very fast. It's hard to say anything about any of these movements. They're very straightforward and light. The orchestration is nice, though, seeking to draw the ear without being showy. Big, energetic ending. Third movement, dance number 2, allegretto, scherzando, which is joking. This grabbed my ear right away with the cheerful wind theme opening the piece. The rhythm is mechanical sounding in a music box way. There's a quick change of texture and rhythm at the 2-minute mark. The fourth movement is a little polka, allegretto. Sounds like a xylophone again, playing the thematic material here. We need more xylophone in music. I really feel like that's an instrument from the 1920s. Anyway, It gets passed around to the theme, not the xylophone, the theme gets passed around to various sections of the orchestra with big booming accents from the percussion. Appealing. Fifth movement, lyric waltz. Heavy sounding waltz rhythm at the opening, which lightens into something more elegant. There's an accordion solo in this one, which is very charming. I liked that little surprise. Sixth movement, Waltz 1, sostenuto, light and elegant, with the waltz rhythm played by a distant piano, melody by alternating winds and strings, and a glimmering ending. All right, now here comes the I guess highlights. Seventh movement, Waltz 2, Allegretto poco moderato. This is a very famous movement because it was the title music to Stanley Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut. So you heard this at the beginning of the movie, and if you remember that, you'll recognize it right away. And it was also used in the film The First Echelon in 1956. Remember that one? I don't either.
No.
Unless you're a big film buff. I don't know. And here it has been slightly rewritten and dramatically reorchestrated from the Jazz Suite Waltz that is the first track on this album. So the Jazz Suite actually is the same basic piece, but it's different here. It's more recognizable as the Eyes Wide Shut opening theme. It didn't get quite the notoriety that like Strauss's Also Sprach Zarathustra did at the beginning of 2001, which is now known as the 2001 Space Odyssey theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, poor Strauss. Anyway, the funny thing about that's what I'm talking about for listeners who don't listen to classical music so much, is that theme that goes dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
The timpani, yeah.
It's 2 minutes long, and it's from a tone poem that's a half an hour long, and nobody knows the next 28 minutes of the work. But they should, because it's really great. Yeah. It's powerful.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's a great work. Anyway, in spite of the... this doesn't really stand out from the rest of the suite, except that it's familiar, really, just because for those of us who have seen that movie. It's got that pa rhythm. I guess it's got a catchy melodic twist at the end of the melodic phrases that leads to the tonic resolution. I think that's what Kubrick liked about it, too. It's certainly what I liked about it. It's pretty straightforward otherwise. And the finale begins with a big flourish, then swirling carnival ground music. The middle section is more like a march. The xylophone returns at 45 seconds, and there's a big finish. Then, track 21, we get a little bonus, a piece called Tahiti Trot from 1927.
Yeah.
You might recognize this piece. It's T for Two, the very famous tune written by Vincent Youmans for the American musical comedy No No Nanette, which was staged in 1925. The reason why this piece is called Tahiti Trot here is the popular songwriter Boris Fomin introduced it into a show, like a variety show in the theater, under the title Tahiti Trot. One evening, the conductor Nikolai Malko bet Shostakovich he couldn't write out a full orchestral score of it in an hour, and Shostakovich did it in less than 45 minutes. And it became a popular encore number that was inserted into the Age of Gold as an entr'acte. So why Tahiti? In the Russian version of the song, the lovers that the lyrics talk about are dreaming of escape from their world of telephones, newspapers, and trams into a paradise of sunshine, palm trees, and bananas. Where else but Tahiti?
Of course.
Anyway, in this particular orchestration, a brass fanfare starts the piece. This is one of those tunes with an introductory verse, which we hear here. I like those. I really miss those. A lot of times they'll cut them out, but I think it's kind of charming.
Yeah.
The main material that we all know, dun, 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 begins at 41 seconds. Can I just say, well, I think we're called adult music. I'm guessing we have listeners that are almost all over 30 years old, probably over 50, really. And I would hope they all know this song. If you don't know T for Two, go to your streaming service and listen to it now. It's one of the most famous songs like ever written, so it's a great 20th century tune. It's from the American
songbook, and
Yeah, the songbook. It's one of those.
And then listen to what Art Tatum did with it, and then you'll realize why jazz is great too. Yep.
Yeah, Art Tatum's made this really one of his most popular, tunes. Okay. The main material begins at 41 seconds, if you want to hear that. It's a charming orchestration played by glockenspiel with harp accompaniment. How great is that?
Yeah, that was fun.
Okay.
And glockenspiel
and harp accompaniment. Yeah. Then we hear the xylophone take the melody. This is the glockenspiel handing off to the xylophone with a clarinet accompaniment. Then come the strings. That's a little less interesting. Muted brass, cellos, and the theme keeps getting passed around to different combinations of instruments. It's incredible that Shostakovich orchestrated this so quickly because it's amazing, so odd. Yeah, some of the combinations are really clever. Yeah. He must have been really having fun. Hey, I wonder what this will sound like.
Yeah.
All right, this is a charming album. The Singapore Symphony acquits itself well without really offering any subtlety of phrasing, but there really isn't much room for that in these works. You just have to like the popular music of the early 20th century for this to appeal. I like it enough, but I don't see myself returning to this very often, but I probably will. It's an appealing release for those interested in this era.
Yeah, I found it just a fun insight. Because Shostakovich, I like a lot of his works.
He can be heavy.
Sometimes, like especially in the all-string works that he has, I get sort of bogged down in his sense of harmony, which is interesting, but it's very dense sometimes, and sometimes I find it just like weighs me down, and I get tired out from what he's doing. Although I do like him as a composer, so it was just kind of fun to take his concept and put it on this lighter material and then see what he would do with it. And it gave me some insight into his, sort of concept as a composer, working with, these less heavy and more familiar kind of melodies and ideas. And I just found it, enjoyable. I thought the orchestral performance is good. It could have been more too mechanical in some hands, but I felt that Litton pulled out the fun and sort of exuberance in the material, kept the tempos going where they needed to, and the phrasing was nice. They were lively. Because the phrasing is important, especially on melodies that are familiar to people. And overall, I thought it was just enjoyable, and it was nice to see. Because, a lot of Russian composers, they can leave a lasting impression of sort of heavy dreariness, and Shostakovich can do that too. It's really like, enlightening to see this sort of lighter side, that he had a fun sort of side to his personality too. And he enjoyed this kind of music. And I just found it like a nice little diversion.
You don't really think of Russian composers as being fun, especially those in the Soviet Union. Although we found Nikolai Kapustin, he does all that jazzy.
Oh yeah, those are great.
He was really fun. Those are great. Those are great. But he's really kind of out of the ordinary, I think. Anyway, onwards. You might have noticed my strategy here is to move closer to the trumpet, and here we are. Yes. We have arrived at trumpet. This album is called Concertos for Trumpet and Piano and Orchestra. That's the title. Anyway, the artist Selina on the trumpet, Maria Radutu piano, the ORF Vienna Radio Symphony Orchestra conducted by Dirk Kaftan, and this is on the Orfeo label. And we start with Shostakovich. A bigger piece. This was still pretty light, but not light like the previous recording. This is his Piano Concerto No. 1 in C minor for piano, trumpet, and strings, Opus 35. All right, this is really a piano concerto with some obbligato trumpet in it. He felt like he needed to highlight the fact that the trumpet was there, because I guess it gets a solo part for a bit.
I think the trumpet does
basically.
Trumpet does a lot more counting than playing in this piece.
Right, but just the fact that he gets to step out a bit, I guess. It's really a piano concerto. I was like that.
2, 3, 4. Ba, 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 ba. And then you're out.
Yeah. piano concerto for piano and trumpet. It's kind of reminds me of in extreme music, my novel, like Alberto Marchisi's piece, Piano Concerto for Solo Cello. Yeah, that was not even possible.
Right.
The entire piano concerto, giant piano concerto, condensed into like a 4-stringed instrument. I just thought that was funny somehow. All right. Anyway, first movement, Allegretto. The piano and the trumpet with the mute begin the piece. It's a very 20th century sound, very bony sounding, I thought. Not this full, lush, romantic sound. After that, we get a meandering piano melody with a prominent walking bass line in the double bass, which is a solo double bass. The main theme comes up after this brief introduction in the piano. It's busy and rather virtuosic and very appealing. Energetic, too. The movement is given good momentum by the pianist Maria Radutu and the orchestra. There are a lot of quick changes of character in this movement that are well navigated, and that's going to happen in all 3 works, or I guess 3 of the 4 works that we hear on this album. I want to say something about that. These are early 20th century pieces, and the whole idea of like changing from rhythm to rhythm like really quickly, like in a schizophrenic way, comes from the movies. The technique of movie editing was a new thing. You would splice the film. If you wanted to have a character, he's in New York, and then in the next scene he's in Paris, and you just splice the film, and there he is, and suddenly there's a change. That we just accept this today because we just grew up with movies, and there were a lot of movies before we were born. But in the early 20th century, movies were a new thing, and this whole idea of editing was completely new to people. They had to adjust to it.
And I have to say,
composers picked that up also and put it in their music. They didn't modulate to different keys. They just went there.
It's gotten much worse, though. If you watch, I love to watch these old movies. Once in a while, I'll get on a kick. Like, I'll just be like, okay, I'm going to watch Robert Mitchum movies, right?
Oh, I like those, and
I love watching old movies, and you'll get an occasional movie or sort of a TV, usually only for cable, one of these special things that allow the actors the time to sort of develop their role, with space, facial expressions, and pauses. But as we've progressed and the way that the editing is done now, some movies are just like, they one after the other edits, cutting out, all of the sort of space in them. And I get tired out. But it's kind of interesting that even the sort of relaxed editing in the early cinematic experience would, influence the way that music would also be sort of phrased and composed too.
Right. And if you want to know what that sounds like, just listen to this album, because all 3 works do this. A lot of these 20th century, just quick changes of character. All well navigated here, by the way. We finally hear the unmuted trumpet at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, playing almost a hunting call. It plays like all these sort of fanfares. Selina only reappears occasionally for punctuation at the end of phrases, while the piano has a perpetuum mobile type of unstoppable line. There's the early 20th century sense of art music patterns with virtuosity, combined with popular sounding rhythms and themes. I really liked pianist Maria Radutu's piano playing in this movement, and she's recorded exceptionally well. She's very clear. Meanwhile, Selina Ott's trumpet lines ring out brightly and solidly, but she does, as Russ mentioned, she doesn't have all that much to do. Second movement, Lento, is ghostly, lightly taken string theme starts us off, and the theme itself is appealing but a bit forlorn. The piano comes in with a light, romantic era sounding theme, and the strings eventually drop out and let her play solo. At the 3-minute mark, the piano suddenly perks up and plays a quick-moving line in the upper end of the piano, which eventually develops into a dramatic part spanning in the keyboard. A dramatic part that spans the keyboard. The pianist is without accompaniment again. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds, the strings reintroduce the theme, this time much more lightly. It's very touching. It's a nice moment. The trumpet comes in at around 5 minutes for a muted melody, meaning it's got the mute in it. It doesn't really sound much like a trumpet here, actually. I was kind of wondering if it was like a woodwind instrument, just the sound it gets. And the piano and trumpet trade off material. The piano once again starts playing slow material solo. He gets a lot of solo. They're not cadenzas either. They're really just kind of these parts where the orchestra drops out. Then the orchestra comes in with thematic material to accompany it with pizzicati violins, marking the second and third beats to clarify the 3/4 time. This movement ends quietly. The third movement is very brief. It's labeled moderato. There's a low bass note on the piano, and a rather mechanical figure on the piano rides down the keyboard. The strings come in playing a forbidding theme with pulsing bass. This movement is just over a minute long and goes into the allegro con brio movement, the fourth movement. A rather aggressive piano theme opens this. By the way, I want to say something else about mechanical rhythms. This is another early 20th century idea. Now, mechanical clocks, this sort of thing, were really popular in Europe in the 19th century. If you remember, in the early 20th century, this whole idea of the mechanization of society was kind of coming into people's thought. If you think of Charlie Chaplin's movie Modern Times, he kind of criticizes that or satires it really in that movie. Well, a lot of music does that too, and they kind of put it in there as a kind of like, sometimes to mean like the lifelessness of modern society, or sometimes just to have an exciting sort of mechanical rhythm that doesn't breathe. Okay, so they rather like that. They thought of it as a 20th century sound.
Right.
Okay. So the fourth movement, a rather aggressive piano theme opens this. Then there's an urgent string rhythm, and the piano starts a frenetic high-speed solo. The trumpet reappears with a fanfare. We have sudden, quick-changing rhythmic profiles. Think the movies again here, as in the first movement, with the trumpet appearing every now and then to accent points in the thematic material with fanfares. This speeds up considerably, with both the piano and trumpet sounding like they're riding a wild horse. At 2 minutes and 25 seconds, the piano starts a new theme, solo, which the orchestra are quick to join in. Then a sudden slowing and a new theme by the orchestra. The trumpet gets some time in the spotlight here, playing a rather shady melody, which the pianist accentuates by crashing down on the keys at one point. It's pretty interesting. Eventually, the piano resumes its frenetic theme when the trumpet ends its section. And piano gets another solo section. This would be the cadenza, I guess, here. An urgent pace is set for the approach to the final cadence with a few trumpet calls included. This is a highly caffeinated movement. An inventive, appealing piece, some fantastic playing, especially by the pianist. Even more enjoyable because the recording is so good. This is probably the best recording of the classical works that we've heard tonight. All right, the second piece on this is by a composer whose star is in the ascendant, Mieczyslaw Weinberg. He was a Jewish composer from Poland who lived in the USSR, and his music, after he died, was just forgotten for the longest time. But in 2010, it started to be revived, and there was a really famous recording, I believe, in 2020 of two of his symphonies that really put him back on the programs again. And now there's a lot of his music is now being recorded and released. We'll probably do something more of his music later this year. I know there are string quartets coming out now. I'll have to give them a listen. Anyway, this is called Trumpet Concerto in B-flat major, Opus 94. So this one features the trumpet. In fact, there's no piano in this. Or is there? I don't remember. Anyway. The first movement is called Etudes. Etudes. Starts out with some pretty impressive arpeggiated grace notes up to the principal note, ripped out of the trumpet. Bright sounds by Ott here. Selina Ott, the soloist. We're finally hearing her at length on this recording. The orchestral strings play a rather menacing set of chords, while the trumpet sticks to fanfares and popular tune melodies. The overall tone of this movement is menacing, with a brief repeating melody that's reminiscent of the circus. So it's kind of an odd, ironic juxtaposition of qualities there. The circus is kind of menacing, though, if you think about how many horror movies take place in the circus.
Scary clowns.
Yeah. So menace and banality is what I got from this movement. Weinberg is considered to be very original in his material, and I guess that's true. I mean, this is kind of an odd sort of juxtaposition of moods. At 3 minutes and 35 seconds, there's a new section where the music softens in contour. Though it's still aggressive, it builds up to something urgent and a bit strident in the 4th minute. At 4 minutes and 35 seconds, everything stops for a second, and the trumpet resumes quietly, playing longer tones with chordal harp accompaniment. It gets kind of spooky, and lots of sudden jumps between moods that make this sound schizophrenic, at like movies again. At 5 minutes, we get back to the opening material, and there's a cool ending on the trumpet. Second movement, called Episodes. There's another urgent string theme, bigger boned, and more early Hollywood film-like theme starts the movement in the strings. The flute plays the gentler second theme in 1 minute and 30 seconds or so, and the trumpet comes in softly in the 2nd minute, sounding a bit like a woodwind instrument here, with a smooth, quiet attack. It's kind of a remarkable how Selina Ott can get that sound. This is the 2nd time she's done it on this recording.
I think the idea was using the mute of the trumpet was to pick up in the same sort of timbre that the flute has, to get sort of this seamless transition before you realize the instrument has changed.
Right.
That's kind of what I got of it. It was a nice effect, yeah.
Nice effect, yeah. I like that as well. That's in the 2nd minute. Listen for that. Okay. The trumpet sound emerges fully as it goes on. The flute takes up a new melody as the trumpet finishes its initial material in the 3rd minute. Then we hear the trumpet back with a mute at the end of the 3rd minute. There are snare drum taps that seem to initiate changes in texture. Something fanfare-like comes next from the trumpet. The trumpet plays a kind of signal call as the crescendo reaches its peak. The music quietens by the 6th minute, and the flute and trumpet play in counterpoint. A dreamier atmosphere emerges in the 8th minute with the trumpet playing signal call motifs, and the flute comes in for an arabesque in the 9th minute to bring the movement to a close. The 3rd movement is called Fanfares, and this starts off immediately from the previous movement with a tolling bell. There's no pause between movements. The trumpet plays what sounds to me like a military signal call, sort of a funeral theme. And suddenly it breaks out into something more athletic and active as we hear another bell sound. This woody percussion sound is the only accompaniment as the trumpet solos, and it's pretty cool. I liked the way it interacted with the trumpet. There's a nice moment 3 minutes in. There are quiet upward grace notes reminiscent of the first movement's intro. And then we're off to longer tones on the trumpet as the orchestra, in the trumpet and orchestra. In the last minute, there's an interesting section with bitty figures from different percussion instruments. The piece ends on a sudden chord after a quiet descent on muted trumpet. So this piece comes across as serious but ironic and a bit forbidding. It's not a warm piece, but it's got something to say. Selina Ott really shines in this piece with her smooth tone that can brighten quickly. Worth hearing. The last work on this album is by André Jolivet, a composer that I really like. He's French, and he's from the war years to the post-war years. This is his concertino for trumpet, string orchestra, and piano. So they're kind of reversed. I guess the trumpet's the more important instrument here, and the piano's accompanying this time. Nice programming, by the way, after the Shostakovich piano-featured piano concerto, which has trumpet in it. This piece was written in 1948. First movement, Allegro. These are all pretty short movements, about 4 minutes each. Well, actually, the first movement's about 5 minutes, and then the others are shorter. This has a percussive, chaotic opening with the solo trumpet dispelling that chaos with a melody. This piece has more quick-changing moods, again, like film editing. When the trumpet plays, Selina Ott slows down the material with longer breathed tones and melodies. The orchestra, on the other hand, is restless. At 1 minute and 20 seconds, a rather chirpy melody over a mechanical groove begins. The piano in this is mostly relegated to orchestral, helping the orchestra out, but she's got some cool parts to play. Oh, by the way, if you're ever getting a quiz, and somebody says, when was this piece written? And someone plays it, and it's got a mechanical, machine-like rhythm, guess early 20th century. Okay, because that's when that was in vogue. I like the syncopated accompanying chords that occasionally pop up in the piano. At 3 minutes and 12 seconds, there's a complete stop, then some tentative orchestral sounds, which lead into another rapidly moving rhythm. The trumpet at this point has a mute, which is removed by 4 minutes and 3 seconds. Some quick repeated note work comes from the trumpet next. Very impressive. And there's a sudden end. Second movement is very brief, 2.5 minutes. It starts with a slow, ponderous theme in the low strings. The trumpet quietly solos over that. The orchestra produces ghostly floating string themes that sound modal, while the muted trumpet plays very quietly over them by the end. The piano is finally heard at the end, building up the energy for the third movement, which connects to the next movement, the allegro. The piano starts off with an easily memorable rhythmic theme that sets the rhythmic and melodic approach for this movement. The trumpet is still muted as it solos over this. At the beginning, it's merely commenting on the piano line. Then the strings start a rushing rhythm at 1 minute and 10 seconds, and the trumpet picks that up and brings it to a resolve. The piano comes back, and the trumpet plays the piano's theme along with it. We go back and forth between rushing strings and the piano's rhythm. This brief movement is brought to a rather surprising climax. It sounds like it could go on. And then there's an 11th track, Rachmaninoff, from his Songs Opus 4, arranged for trumpet and piano. Song number 4 from that set, Do Not Sing My Beauty. This is completely different in character than everything we've heard on this album. It's a quiet, romantic accompaniment by the piano. The trumpet plays the lovely melody to arpeggiated piano chords. The melody is touching, and we hear Selina Ott's lovely ability with phrasing in her shaping of the melody with tone and dynamics. This is why they put this on here, because they wanted you to see that I can also play this beautiful romantic legato style, which the other works on this album don't require. The piano sensitively accompanies, but this is really Ott's chance to show the beauty of her legato line. It ends mysteriously in the piano as it began. Of the 3 albums I talked about, the classical albums, this is my favorite one of the 3. It's excellently performed and recorded, enjoyable throughout. 3 works well worth hearing, though I'd advise hearing them at a different sitting. For me, classical trumpet can be 3 works of classical trumpet solo could be way too much, but they're all great works.
Yeah, I'm always, as a trumpet player, I'm always interested to hear a new classical trumpet recording because, they don't come out as often as violin works or other things. And
which come out every day.
Yeah. So these were good to hear. I like Jolivet. I would say that I prefer his Concerto for Trumpet number 2. It's one of my more favorite pieces rather than this work. I just think it has a lot more interesting melodic kind of themes in it.
Boy, I'm embarrassed to say I don't know that one.
Oh, you do know it because we listened to that. It was one of the things we shared early. I had a kind of obscure...
I've heard it. I got to go back.
Yeah, you should check that one out.
I've got that CD somewhere. I got to look at the...
Yeah, as you say, he's an interesting composer, and he did a few things for trumpet, and I like that one a lot.
I like his music quite a lot, actually. I can recommend quite a bit of it. There's a great piece for flute and piano called Chantalinos, which was also arranged for flute and string quartet, which I recommend people hear. I really like it.
And the Weinberg is kind of interesting. It's going to take a few more listens for me to figure out everything that's going on. It's kind of dense. I need to unpack it a little bit more with repeated listenings. I like Ott's playing. What I feel her strength as a trumpet player in is she has an incredible sense of control. She can play softly, and she can play these sort of extended lines with this sort of confidence at a low volume, and the phrases come out beautifully. I wanted a little bit more sort of dynamic character on some of the more expressive lines. It just might not be in her personality. But I think, in these works, as you say, the Rachmaninoff is included as a contrast with this more legato, beautiful style. And I feel that, that may actually be her strength rather than these sort of angular percussive things. I would love to hear her sound and technique on sort of the cornet repertoire of virtuosic solos that all trumpet players practice for solo repertoire coming up, rather than this sort of 20th century material. So I'm going to keep her name in mind to hear some more lyrical type of things that I think may bring out her personality more than these type of works that kind of favor a more forceful, kind of percussive style of trumpeting. Because I think her strengths may be in tone and phrasing, and they may shine on other works. Although not a bad performance here, and I was happy to hear the Weinberg here. It reminded me of Jolivet, and I want to go back and check out that other work that I like a lot.
Yeah, I have to listen to that again too.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite ones of the modern, the trumpet repertoire. There's not as much there as there is for other instruments. So when you get a good piece, you want to kind of make sure that other people know about it so that it gets played. I think Wynton Marsalis even recorded the Jolivet number 2. I think he did. I believe he did. Wow. Yeah.
I only know him when he does classical music. He usually does like Handel or something like that. He just like Baroque.
I always liked his classical playing better than his jazz, but that's just me. So,
all right.
Speaking of which, it's jazz time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's jazz time.
And we're gonna just take that trumpet theme and run with it to the end.
We really are. This is quite a variety of recordings this week.
Yeah, and well, I have to say, I'm pretty happy with the jazz picks in a certain sense of character. And what I mean by that is I've found that in recent years, there's sort of a trend of trumpet players that have sought out this sort of dark kind of tone that sort of goes against what, the tradition of trumpet playing. And they've sought this out, I'm sure, in their concept, but also in the equipment that they use. So you'll see a lot of trumpet players using these very expensive customized trumpets that have the mouthpiece is, built into the trumpet. It's a one-piece sort of instrument with a very thick walled mouthpiece, and it produces this great thick tone that doesn't get those overtones and brightness of a trumpet of years gone by. And I think it's gone too far in some senses.
I know what you mean.
And a lot of these trumpet players, they all sound the same. And then, a lot of them will also play flugelhorn, and they sound exactly the same on both instruments. And to me, it's gone a bit too much in this the quest for darkness, so to speak.
It's not just that. It's kind of like they wanted to get away from the bright sound because, I want to do something different. So somebody does the dark sound, and then somebody catches on to that, and they want to be different too. And pretty soon, everybody's the same doing the dark sound, and you're not hearing even the enjoyable bright sound anymore. The dark sound really isn't as enjoyable.
And there's a lot of appeal to that bright sound. One player that always just comes to mind is Randy Brecker. He has this sound.
Oh, man.
It can be
lights up the sky.
Yeah, it can be warm and fluffy, but when he lights it up, it's a laser that just cuts through, It rips the curtains off from the window. And I miss that. And I also miss the player who has that sort of kind of variety of tones. So I was happy with my picks this week that I've got some players with some kind of tonal spectrum in here.
We certainly do, especially in one of them that we're going to talk about
we're going to get to, which is what it's going to be really on my list. But anyway, we're going to start out with a player that I like a lot because he sort of captures a lot of the old style. I think he really embodies one player in particular, but he also brings a lot of modern qualities to the sound that may take a little bit deeper listening, but I think I caught them in my first few listens here. And that we're speaking of our first album by the trumpeter Jason Palmer and his new release. This came out last month in May, Con Alma on the Steeplechase label. Came out May 13th. Now, Jason Palmer is currently assistant professor at Berklee College of Music. He also has a visiting assistant professorship at Harvard University. He's in his early 40s right now. On his way up, he won a few trumpet competition awards, and he's been on Steeplechase since 2010, and this is his 10th album on the label.
Now, I want to ask you, before you go into these songs, who's that on the cover with him? Is that his daughter?
Could be. I'm not sure.
I don't know. It just kind of he's with this younger
there's a young girl
on the cover.
So he has this career going well on Steeplechase. I think he's recorded on over like 40 albums as a sideman with greats Roy Haynes, Herbie Hancock, Jimmy Smith, the organist, Wynton Marsalis and the Lincoln Center Jazz Ensemble, Ravi Coltrane, John Coltrane's son, Lee Konitz, Phil Woods, Roy Hargrove, and others. So he's built up his career. He's also part of the jazz academic world now as well. On this release, he's on trumpet, Leo Genovese on piano and Fender Rhodes, and Joe Martin on bass, and on drums, Kendrick Scott, who we heard last week as well with Joey Alexander, the young, how should we say?
Now composer,
virtuosic player and composer as well.
Yeah.
And so this album has a lot of interesting things. We're going to get some standards and some covers of other jazz composers' originals, and as well as some Palmer originals here. There's some things hidden in the works that I'll pull out as we go along. We're going to start out with a standard from, although a not as much performed standard, but from one of the great composers, Jimmy Van Heusen, Moonlight Becomes You. We don't hear this one so often anymore.
A nice title.
Great melody, yeah. This one begins with a drum intro. Palmer leads into the melody. Now, pay attention, folks. This is usually a 4/4 kind of ballad. Get your fingers out to count. An unusual time signature here. It's in 5/8 time.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so think of 6/8, a little waltz, but it's missing the beat on the second bar. That's quite a change for this. I knew something was odd, but I had to figure it out, so I started from the beginning.
Kind of sounds
again.
Like it has a limp, It's not really.
Yeah, it's missing a toe or something. But Scott marks out the subdivisions clearly in his symbols. It makes it easier for you to figure it out. Palmer mixes clear articulation, sometimes some nice half-valve smears into notes that makes an interesting combination on the melody. What I like here is he's got that traditional earlier era jazz trumpet sound with some brightness to it. And in his sound, there's a little burr of roughness that happens throughout this album. So inside that clear tone, you'll hear a little roughness that comes out more or less in different sections. He starts his solo, including some more staccato phrases, working into some lyrical lines. And after tumbling phrases, his phrasing style is really quite unique. He gets up high to light it up for a bit. Then we get a solo from Genovese, who builds up tension, lots of rapid and short phrases, but then he moves on to more connective ideas with his soloing phrases as he moves on through, and Palmer returns with the melody and gets some more playful interval improvisations in there, and then a piano vamp and final kind of shimmering run close it out. So an old song done with an interesting new meter. I thought that was kind of a cool way to start it out.
I thought the pianist here, when he had his, there's a moment there, he sounds kind of like the piano in Stravinsky's Petrushka, with all these kind of like just flurries of notes.
Yeah.
Going. I thought it was a pretty interesting touch.
Gets a little bit creative in that exposition there. That was interesting. Track 2 is Old Folks. It's a kind of a standard tune by Willard Robinson. An interesting playful introduction here. Some staccato trumpet and romping piano chords, that kind of percussive thing. They lead into the melody. It has kind of a light rumba beat before it switches to swing on the bridge and then back again. I like Palmer's light blowing on the melody. He makes it sing. He's a player who plays soft really well, and he likes to do it, and I like that contrast. He's not always blaring it out. They go through this twice, keeping the melody fairly straight. Genovese then gets an animated piano solo with lots of anticipation ideas in his rhythms. They kind of lead on to the next phrase. Palmer joins back for his own solo. It's got a lot of double time runs, and he slows it up a bit on the swing section, and then plays the final section of the melody, and they make a little romping coda, a little different section as an outro to the end. Now, track 3, the title track, is Con Alma. This is a Dizzy Gillespie composition. Con Alma, I guess in Spanish would mean soulfully or with soul. Con, with soul. Genovese switches to Rhodes here, and the chords pan left to right with this phasery effect. It's a bit disconcerting in headphones.
Yeah, so I said it sounds like it's being played from a spaceship, sort of like in Close Encounters, dun, dun, dun. Yeah. It sounds like it's just this weird, otherworldly sound. Yeah.
Since I liked it better on speakers, in headphones it gets you spinning a bit. Now this is the original like Dizzy Gillespie's
Pink Floyd album.
Yeah. 4/4, and here we're going to get a 5/4 version.
Yeah.
So, get ready for something different here.
Now, 5/4 can be a lot of things. It could be an extra beat, or it could be like an extra step in a waltz. It could be 1 2,
1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. Here it seems to be more of an extra beat, especially if you know this melody. If you know this Dizzy tune. But Palma comes in soon on this with a legato improvisations over the piano thing that's going on. Scott has a heavy cymbal Latin beat going, and Martin works a pulsing bass line underneath. It moves into the melody of longer phrases. Palmer has overdubbed another trumpet part, it seems, to double and sometimes harmonize his own part. Genovese takes a Rhodes solo, curiously using only his right hand. I don't know what happened. I guess he just wanted to be free harmonically over the bass.
He just wanted that high sound too, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And he flits and flutters around speedily over the keyboard, over Martin's thumping bass patterns. Palmer comes in for his solo. He's keeping it very lyrical here, singing phrases. His relaxed phrases with little turns, then turn to some speedier runs and some higher phrases. Listen for the nice descending rhythmic patterns at the end. It's like da di da di da di da di da, a little kind of rhythmic play. I really like that. Martin gets a little bass expression time before the melody returns. The little overdub licks are back, and they give kind of a Spanish image of a bullfighter arriving over the final vamping chords. Kind of a unique take on an old Dizzy Gillespie tune. Now we're going to get an original from Palmer called Miracles. This is a kind of wispy 8-beat feeling rhythm. It opens with piano chords and figures over a pulsing bass. Palmer plays a lyrical melody here with little ornaments, some nicely accented and shorter notes. There's a little interlude by piano before Palmer returns for the final section that has some nice rhythmic change-ups. That little burr in his sound I mentioned before really comes out on this number. At the end of the melody, it comes down very softly for Palmer's solo to begin. And I like how he can play very soft and focus rather on interesting rhythmic ideas rather than, that typical trumpet bravura. It's a short solo, though, and gets passed off to Martin for a little bass solo and then back to the melody. Genovese gets to take it out with some gentle piano. It's a very pretty tune with a nice, easy atmosphere, and I liked it.
Yeah, the piano sound is really gorgeous on this track. By the way. I really liked what he got. Yeah.
It's atmospheric.
Yeah.
That's a little swig of Knob Creek, the official beverage of the.
I think I got to go get my glass over here. I was kind of trying to stay dry over here.
Track 5, we're going to go with a Duke Pearson tune, You Know I Care. I tell my wife this every day. Does she believe me? I don't know. The piano intro
just play this track for her.
Goes into a slow rendition of the melody. The rhythm is kind of like a 12/8, so think 4/4, but divided into 3 for each beat, because you can tell the busy and clicky drumming by Scott stands out in contrast to Alma's or Palmer's lyrical and slow 4-beat melody. Palmer keeps his solo lyrical and singing. He picks up on the triplet subdivisions a few times to give phrases with some extra rhythmic push. Martin gets a bass solo next with more triplet ideas included, and then Genovese gives another solo with unexpected phrasing of lines bubbling up and ending in chiming chords. His concept is always surprising on this album. Palmer joins back in for the melody that repeats the final phrase several times into a long held chord that he gets some final licks over. Track 6, another Palmer original, Black Beauty. We're back to Rhodes here, and we get some rubato things under legato trumpet phrases that make the intro with light drum textures and cymbals. Palmer adds a little pitch shift with half valve things at the end of the phrase. At about 1 minute and 20 seconds, the trio starts a laid-back waltz tempo. Palmer comes back with some light improvised lines featuring triplets and varied articulation. He mixes up the rhythmic figures and works up to some longer high notes and later more rapid phrases. His solos are free from cliches and surprisingly unpredictable. That's what I liked about his style. Genovese gets a swirling Rhodes piano solo using both hands this time. More interesting. It's an interesting combination of short articulated notes and phrases, panning left and right held out chords with that kind of phasing effect. It's a long solo, and the track reaches almost 11 minutes. Wow. Palmer joins back in for some more rhythmic play and then slows it down to the original rubato idea for an outro ending on the shifted pitch from the valve that we heard from the beginning. Track 7, a Wayne Shorter tune, Nefertiti. The trio starts it out with some building chord ideas in the piano. Palmer comes in with the melody while Genovese plays busy rhythmic right-hand figures underneath. Palmer's having some fun with the melody with a descending line that gets some growl into his sound. Has a kind of 8-beat feel, but the rhythm hangs loose, especially combined with what Genovese is doing. It gets more driving under some intense high and rhythmic improvisations from Palmer, and then it soon settles again for a reprise of the melody by Palmer and some softer but rhythmic improvisations. Track 8, another Palmer original, Raise the Love Ceiling. I don't know what that means really, but
that's a good title.
Sounds like a good idea. It's a ballad with a lot of space in it. Palmer gets his warmer tone sound going here. It's a very slow 4-beat feel. The simple melody line for trumpet has a few measures of gaps between the phrases, which alternate between lower and higher registers. There's a bit of distortion in the trumpet tone here. I don't know if the levels are too hot or he wanted this kind of roughness to the sound. But being that it's kind of a ballad piece, it's a straight composed piece pretty much without solos, but it ends on a long held trumpet note. Fittingly, track 9 is Kenny Durham, the great jazz trumpeter's composition Fair Weather, and I feel that Palmer has a lot of influence from Kenny Durham. If you know his sound and way of phrasing, particularly, I think stylistically he's got a big influence on Palmer's playing, which we don't hear a lot in modern trumpet players, so it's nice to sort of hear this influence going back. There's a lot of space in this tune here as well. A relaxed tempo, a nice bass pulse from Martin, and light drumming from Scott. The tempo picks up and the rhythmic drive increases as Palmer reaches the end of the melody. Genovese is up for a solo. It's a bit unusual, going from skittish chords, runs, and then more funky things, and finally ending in some tricky rhythmic figures. Palmer has a solo with some Kenny Durham-like sounds, clearer articulation, also exploring the upper register. He brings it back down to the mellow ideas for the melody at the end with a little staccato lick to finish it up. Track 10, another original from Palmer, Nameless. This one starts with a kind of hypnotic bass pattern and ghostly piano figures. Palmer brings in the soft 3/4 melody. It's an unusual and very soft piano harmonies that continue through a bass solo from Martin. Then Palmer comes in clear and bright, higher in the register to start his short solo. It's intense, but still quite legato. He ties it in while softening the tone back to the melody, and the trio rhythm section takes it out softly. 11, a old standard tune by Ralph Ranger, Easy Living. It's an easy swinging waltz tempo. For this standard, Palmer plays the melody soft and bubbly, launching into improvisation soon, and then coming back to the melody. He's light and swinging in contrast to Genovese, who comes in sounding like he just had a triple espresso. He's really animated here. Palmer comes back for some more melody lines before Martin gets a bass solo. And there's another little melody section once more. And then Genovese goes around on the chords while Scott has some time to drum to the end with a little final slowdown. We're going to end things up with a Palmer original called It's a Brand New Day. This is a swinging tune, a final switch to Rhodes piano. I like the interesting interval lines and then rhythmic bounce and syncopation in the trumpet melody. Palmer swings elegantly in his solo here. Nice phrasing with turns, little ornaments on the melody lines and in his solo. Genovese has an energetic Rhodes solo. It's really swinging, tight driving staccato left-hand chord jabs, some speedy right-hand runs, and then Palmer comes back once more for a run through the melody.
I mentioned that Rhodes sound really isn't an ordinary Rhodes sound. It sounds kind of distorted, or there's some kind of effect on it. I thought it was really odd. It really stood out.
Yeah.
And I don't know that was a good thing for this track. You were kind of, it was such an odd sound that you were paying attention to him all the time, even when the trumpet was soloing.
Yeah. You can get some different piano effects. I don't know if this is a synth or an actual, Rhodes, or what the vintage of it is, or what the settings are. A bit much. And then if you're listening in headphones, the panning of the kind of phased sound goes around a bit.
Whose album is this anyway? It's the trumpet players, right?
Yeah. Anyway, I thought it's an interesting mix of material. We've got some standards and then covers of originals from jazz greats, which is always great to do. Once a jazz musician makes a tune, it shouldn't fade into obscurity forever. It's nice that other people pick up on them. So it's nice to hear a Wayne Shorter tune and such here. And then Palmer's got his own originals in. I like, a trumpet quartet, no sax in the mix. So the trumpet is full force in the front. Of course, that plays on the chops. Trumpet's a hard instrument you need endurance for. So, it's nice to have a sax to offset that. But when you only have the trumpet, you've got a lot more responsibility here. I like the interesting meter changes to the tunes, especially with the Dizzy Gillespie tune and then that 5/8 that we hear too. And I like Palmer's old style sound. It's not that excessively dark tone that we hear a lot of players getting today. He can still be very warm, but he has that nice brightness that he can bring out when he wants. And he often plays softly on purpose, which I like as well. I found his improvised ideas are very fresh. I'm often very surprised at the directions his solo takes, and I found all of his solos very intriguing. So I think he's gotten a lot of attention and called a player to watch and things, and I'm a believer now. I found that especially his improvisations are fresh, but he has an old style charm to his playing, and so I'll be interested in listening to anything else he records too.
Yeah, I thought he sounded good, but the thing for me is that I kept being drawn to the pianist because he was really doing so many odd things.
Yeah, he's an odd player. Yeah,
the expression to photobomb, when you photobomb like someone's photo, you just kind of go in there. Yeah. I feel like the piano kind of like piano bombed this album in a way, because these ideas that he has too when he plays, sound like they come from outer space.
Oh, okay.
He had these Schomburgian isolated scale rips to spacey electronic sounds, interstellar scales. His approach is to quickly change his approach when inspiration strikes, and he'll go from section to section unpredictably. Yep. And he stood out, I thought, too much on this album, but I did enjoy the trumpet playing, and like you said, the odd time signatures. There's a lot of really good creative playing on this album. Yeah, but I don't know. I think he could have taken a little bit more of a backseat.
I think we've heard Genovese before, and that's his character as sort of this unpredictable, sort of bursting out character to his playing. It'd be kind of interesting to hear him on his own. If
he was on his own record, I mean, I'd want to hear that. Yeah. I think that'd be interesting. But
it's kind of like that. It was reminding me because I saw that Pasquale Grasso has a new album out, and we heard his.
Does he put 8 albums out a year or something?
Yeah, and we liked his one,
so many records.
His one solo album out, but then we heard him as an accompanist, and he wasn't really suited for that role because behind the vocalist, he was just sort of, doing too many interesting things. He just couldn't
resist. It was on that Samara Joy, the first track on that Samara Joy album. Yeah. Although once the drums and bass come in, he's more tame. He'll kind of lay back into the accompanying role. But when it was just him and her, he was like, "Hey, here I am."
And it's kind of too much in the background. But anyway, Jason Palmer. I like that old style sound. A little bit of Kenny Durham influence, and someone who can play soft very well. We don't hear that a lot, and not too dark. So check it out, trumpet players. Very good. Now, the odd one out in the middle here. So all the way from South Africa, which was what caught my eye on this, and a debut recording. So I thought, why not? Let's check it out. And I actually liked it a lot, although this is where my streaming frustrations come to bear. So
he hasn't told me what he's going to say now, because he said, I'm going to say something about this. Like, I want to know what it is. And here I get to listen to the audience. So I'm as keen to hear this as you are.
So we've got this debut recording from Muneeb Hermans and his quintet on the Milestone Studios label. I don't know if that's a real label or just a studio that puts this out, which I'm suspecting, which I'll get to in a moment. It's called 1-4-HP. This came out last month. And HP stands for Hanover Park, which is, I guess, a district of Cape Town, South Africa, where Hermans hails from. And I guess this is a place that, might have some problems, and a tough place to grow up, dealing with the sort of leftover effects from apartheid and whatnot. A tough town to grow up in, but he grew up there and made good for himself through music. And I wanted to give credit to this district where he grew up and still lives, actually. And he's a youngster, too, at 28 years old. And this is his debut recording. And, I was thinking we've done a lot of international kind of jazz musicians, but we haven't found anyone from South Africa yet at any of our recordings. So I thought, this will be interesting. And then I was thinking about it. We come across a lot of international people living in an international community, and I get to travel. Well, before Corona, I did anywhere around the world, so I've been a lot of places.
Both did, yeah.
And you know what? I haven't come across a lot of South Africans, but one story popped out in my mind. Do you know any South Africans, by the way?
There was one here. I knew a guy. Yeah, and I've met a few in Thailand as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not like they're all over the place, but
I haven't met any in Japan, but it brought back a musical reference for me. So this goes all the way back to when I was in high school. Are you ready for this?
Okay. Yeah.
And this goes back to, I think it was 1987 or 1988. I grew up in upstate. Okay, Richard? Upstate.
Is that okay with you? That's my brother.
It's his brother. He doesn't like our New York accents, but we don't have accents in upstate New York. That's why I speak this sort of non-distinct American English accent. Anyway, I had tickets to see Chick Corea Electric Band that had was it Vinnie Colaiuta or Dave Weckl? I can't remember. Chick Corea and John Patitucci on bass and Spyro Gyra. You remember Spyro Gyra?
I remember Spyro Gyra.
So anyway,
college days.
I got tickets.
They were a 70s band, mainly.
Yeah, I went down and I got tickets to see them at the Palace Theater in New York. You know, this old traditional theater. But I wanted to get front row. I was there on opening day, but I couldn't. I only got second row. So, all right. So I showed up at the night and, I'm wondering who's got front row. But there was the front row must have been like season tickets or something, and people didn't show up. Just before the show started, this huge guy, I mean, he must have been 300 and some pounds, showed up and sat down right in front of me, completely obscuring my view of the stage. And he turned around and he said, "Hey, John Smythe, I played the congas." And he was from South Africa. That was my first South African image. And he talked to me through the whole concert and kind of distracted me. Anyway, I haven't met many South Africans after that. But anyway, back to the music here.
They generally keep to themselves as far as I can tell.
As far as I can tell. Anyway, I'm always interested to hear a new trumpet player. And here's where my frustration comes up. We've got the quintet here, featuring Muneeb Herman's trumpet and flugelhorn, Kurt Bowers on drums, Sean Samby double bass, Blake Hellaby piano, Justin Balears alto saxophone. That's the quintet. That's what you can find online. Then I listened to the album, and you're going to hear a nice guitar solo, unknown, trombone, no idea, and a female vocal, no clue. And I spent an hour looking for who these musicians might be, doing all kinds of searches, and I don't know. So, that's the frustration of streaming. I couldn't find any credits to who the rest of these musicians are added to the quintet. And it's a shame because this is a really nice release. I got into it. And I don't know. I'm assuming this is all original material. Maybe it's Herman's compositions. I don't know if there's any co-authors, but there's no credit information to be found. So we'll just go with what we know. The first piece is called Inner Peace Part 1 and 2. This starts out with a low bowed bass, very interesting. Cymbals and a single repeated piano note are added. Sax and trumpet come in on a lonely rubato modal melody. Piano and cymbal fills swell behind. The trumpet and sax trade some call and response lines, getting more animated, as do the drum toms behind. And then the horns restate the melody. At about 3.5 minutes, the drums start a slow, steady beat, and Sanby adds a slow, rhythmic bass line. The horns add a new, soft but syncopated riffy melody, and then a very patient electric guitar solo of tasty lines, with space between the phrases emerges. I wish I knew who was playing that. The horns come in with the riff melody for backing behind the solo. There's some tasty bass fills by Samby, and then the horns continue the riff to fade it out. A nice opening, kind of measured start. I was intrigued from this first track. The next track, 2, is called Influence. The piano cycles around some chords for an intro with bass and drums at a medium tempo. There's a interesting female vocalization that comes in with a synthy type of flute sound that comes in for a melody on top. Herman's is up then for a trumpet solo. He builds it well. Lots of exciting ideas, exploring outside the harmonies, adding some trill flourishes. Next is a piano solo with rhythmic chords and cascading falls. The vocalization melody returns with male voices added for a chorus. Then things fade down to just drums, bass with a few sparse piano chords. Then we get Track 3, one for HP. And so the HP is the Hanover Park, his place that he grew up in, Cape Town. And so here it starts with a jolly rhythmic piano opening of bouncing chords. They're joined by bass and drums. It gets to a samba-like beat. Sax and flugelhorn. So Hermans is on flugelhorn then. Join in with a melody line. First in unison, and then it's harmonized. It's a happy sounding feel. The bridge is even more uplifting. Hermans gets a flugelhorn solo. It matches the mood with lots of tight rhythmic licks. Balearis is next on alto with nice flowing phrases over the Latin rhythm, and Helleby gets a piano solo with a more rhythmic and percussive solo. Then they all come back in to run through the melody together again. Track 4, Yet Another Day. This one begins with an ostinato bass riff to start things out. Heavy piano chords and drumming join in giving a weary feel to that another day idea that everyone who works knows about. It softens when the sax and trumpet come in on the unison melody. It's sparse, contemplative with ideas, with lots of gaps in the ideas for tight drum fills from Bowers. At the end of the melody, Sambi gets an intense groove going on the bass that leads to a break. The horns are back now with a hint of Freddie Hubbardish ornamentation. A new intense Latin lick melody starts. Things soften down to cymbals and percussion textures for Balearis to blow an alto solo, and he takes his time building it up nicely. The pulsing Latin groove returns, driving him along as things get intense. It comes down soft again for a piano solo from Helleby. He takes it through different feels and ideas, sometimes bluesy. The groove forms again. It gets percussive. He's really pounding it out and venturing outside the chords. The piano here with some crazy runs ending down low. Next is a drum and conga breakdown. Oh, there's conga on here too. I don't know who plays it. Maybe we'll find out someday. With bass hits for emphasis. And then trumpet and sax return for the Latin lick melody to take it out. Track 5, Kapstad. Drum beat intro, joined by the bass and piano for a happy cycle of chords. Sax and trumpet add a happy gospel-y kind of feel melody. It's got a very infectious groove. Sambi gets a rhythmically snappy bass solo over some tight brush drumming before horns come back for some more melody. Helleby has a solo next, starting softly but bouncy, happy, and building it up with some dazzling piano runs. The horns again come back with the melody and take it to the end. Interestingly, no trumpet solo here or in the previous tune. Hermans is very generous with the solos for his sidemen.
Well, I guess these are his original maybe that's why. I want to mention in this one, Kapstad, the drum groove kind of reminded me a bit of Kraftwerk's Trans-Europe Express. Has that kind of mechanical groove. Yeah. It just kind of put me in the mood of that. Right. I was like, I wonder if they're kind of channeling that here.
Yeah, could be. Interesting. Track 6 is Me. That's it, Me. Another ostinato bass line. This time more menacing, doubled in the piano left hand. It gets to a driving Latin even beat. On top is layered a vocalized melody again, in unison with Herman's Harmon muted trumpet in this case. So the vocal and the mute sound really cool together. A nice blend. At the end of the melody, it breaks into swing for a section with some piano lines, then back to the vocal melody for a final strain with the Latin beat. Hermans is next up with a harmon muted solo. He brings the charm of the mute out really well with pressurized, tight phrases and articulation. Trumpet players will know what I mean when you get that mute up to the mic and you can get some really percussive effects with it. Balearis is next on alto. Then they switch to swing when he enters, and he gets more boppy in his approach to the solo. He quotes softly as in a morning sunrise, the melody as he fits it into the progressions there before he wraps it up. Still swinging. Helleby is next for a piano solo. As he reaches the climax, the groove changes back to Latin, and the vocalization and trumpet melody return with bass grooving between the strains and some drum fills the second time around to close it out with the bass. Track 7, a song for Dukes, D-O-U-K-S. It's a slow waltzing intro with piano chords and a singing bass line. A legato horn melody line is added on top. There's a trumpet in there too. It has a strain similar to My Grandfather's Clock. But it's not quite that, but it'll remind you of that. There's a modulation to a section with a happy improvisations traded between flugelhorn, alto, and trombone. After trading, they all join in together, blowing as it grows over Halaby's percussive piano chords and then ties back to the melody. It softens and slows to the end with the piano taking it out. And we're going to end up with track 8, The Bridges We Build. This one gets a slow, heavy groove and a cycle of chords that start out with a few improvised sax and flugelhorn licks that lead to kind of a modal horn melody. Has a lot of dynamic and rhythmic changes, then gets softer with more legato phrases as the groove disappears. The trombone is still here and adds some nice thickness to the other horn lines. The beat intensifies again as the horns doodle around and Bellairs gets an alto solo. It's rhythmic. He really gets burning with an edgy tone. I really like this solo. When he finishes, they go around the chord cycle a few times. Then the horns return with the melody. Bellairs is not done yet and gets some finishing touches with his burning alto among the other horns with some more improvisations as they bring it to a close. I like this release. It's a lot of positive energy, inventive arrangements. I like Herman's playing too. He should play more. Why he doesn't solo on these other tunes, I don't know. But maybe he's just generous, giving a lot of space to his bandmates. The alto sax particularly stands out. I hope we may hear more from him. These arrangements are good. His trumpet concept is nice. It's nice to hear something out of South Africa. But whoever put this release out, I wouldn't put it on him, but this studio or a record company, let's get together. Let's get the recording information online at least somewhere so we can know who the other musicians are and get some more credits here. So this can get publicized and credits properly. I want to know who the trombonist is, the vocal, the guitarist. I couldn't find it anywhere, and I spent more than a half an hour searching, looking on all kinds of sites. So a great release. Let's get these musicians known. More South African jazz. Let's get it out there.
Yeah, what's going on there? I like this too. It was a good feeling record, and so very welcome in our current times. Also, I like the adventurous soloing on this record too, especially towards the end. There was some really good stuff, like you had mentioned the burning solo at the end. Yeah, in general, so a nice discovery.
Yeah, just upbeat. Positive. I like the mixture of feels. It's got Latin-y things, a little gospel feel. It's interesting to see jazz go back to Africa, and then, what are they going to do with the kind of rhythms and things? But I felt that Herman's has got a really good jazz concept rooted in the trumpet tradition. And but yet he's kind of a modest player. I think he's capable of
nothing wrong with
doing a lot more. But the arrangements stand out kind of nicely in a variety. So, and it's his debut. So, hey, everybody listen to it. So, it's this kind of catch-22. We would never find out about this if not for streaming. Right. It probably won't make it onto a disc that you can buy, but we can hear it, but yet we can't know really who's playing everything on it because there's not enough information out there.
Did you check for a disc? There's nothing available?
Nah, I looked everywhere. Yeah, you can't find anything. Not yet anyway, so.
Okay. We'll see.
Anyway, let's hope that this develops into something more. I sent a message to him through Facebook, but it's kind of last minute, so maybe you'll see it after this.
Okay.
And I told him we were going to talk about his recording. So,
okay.
Anyway, we'll see what happens. All right, we're going to end up with a big surprise.
This was the one I was kind of wondering about myself too.
Yeah, this is one. The more I listen to it, the more it reveals itself. And
I got the same.
I can't say too much about this. And I'm going to listen to this more and more. Now we're going to cross over to Sweden, to not the trumpeter, but the cornetist, Tobias Wiklund, with his latest release, came out last month, Silver Needle.
Yeah.
And which refers to a Chinese tea. And he is a avid tea drinker, apparently, here. So Wiklund, let's see, the Swedish cornetist, also a great trumpet player. I guess he's about 36 years old now. But he's curiously developed a personal connection with these days, lesser heard cornet.
And the mute.
And the mute.
Every one of these songs has a mute on it.
Mutes, especially the Harmon mute with the stem in it, which nobody uses. I used to use it to play the Pink Panther theme for comedic effect, but he's found some artistic uses for it. He got some attention for his 2019 debut album, Where the Spirits Eat. Magazines raved about it as one of the year's best albums, and he's got a real wide range on the instrument with a mature voice. And he goes even further here with this latest release, Silver Needle. He's written most of the music with a couple exceptions that we'll take a look at. And interestingly, as I mentioned before, he's a kind of tea drinking enthusiast, and he says, quote, Silver Needle is also a very fine Chinese tea. In our part of the world, people just pour boiling water over a tea bag, and the result is often boring.
I actually know people like him.
Yeah. Knowing what tea
and they're all European.
Knowing what tea can do and drinking it in the right way can open up great experiences. Silver Needle has been fermenting for 15 years, so it's strong and amazing. I drink a lot of it when I compose. It increases my creativity and allows me to fly high. And fly high he does on this release. So you're going to have to listen to this. I'm not going to do it justice by talking about all of the things that are in this recording.
Yeah, and you're going to have to listen to it more than one time because it makes such an odd impression the first time you hear it. I'm
going to tell you, I'm going to definitely buy this.
I'm thinking I'm going to buy it now too because you said that. Because I was thinking, do I want to buy this? I don't know. It's a really odd album.
And it's probably going to make my best of list at this point, and we're halfway through the year.
I suspected it would after I heard it. I was like, I bet Russ is going to really love this.
Now, and we'll get into why this is. Partly, the instrumentation and programming is kind of two different approaches. So Wiklund is on cornet, and his rhythm section is on bass, Lars Mork, drums, Daniel Fredriksson, piano, Simon Toldum. Now, on several of the tracks, we're also going to have a brass ensemble that plays with only drums added. So they take over all the harmonic duties. We've got an additional trumpet to the mix, trumpet with cornet. Jonas Lindberg, trombone, Karin Hamar, euphonium, Stefan Findin, and tuba that will take over the bass role, Magnus Wiklund. I don't know if that's any relation to Tobias himself or not. So we're going to get various, arrangements with different instrumentation. And most of these are going to be Wiklund's original compositions, which will start out with Existence is Your Perfume. A nice title.
It's already looking up.
And Wiklund's puckish. I think this is the great adjective for his sound. Cornet sound comes right out in the melody over the drum toms that are beating out a 6/8 feel here. Piano and bass join in, with the piano adding pretty descending figures as the beat changes up to an 8-beat feel for a few bars. It's got this sort of different time shift in it. Wiklund gets lyrical and singing, then brings back some staccato articulation, which he's so good at. His soloing is melodic and singing, soaring high with humor. Toldum takes a piano solo, starting with extended waves of sound, picking up on that idea from that altered time feel, before getting sparse and then moving to some runs. Mork gets a rhythmic bass solo too, and then Wiklund comes back for a reprise of the melody. But it's over too soon. This tune has a magical kind of feel to it that you don't want to end.
I was thinking exotic 1920s French cafe jazz or something.
Exactly.
Something kind of. It doesn't really sound American, it's kind of, but it's got that,
his
American music by way of Europe or something.
Phrasing concept is this in the cornet, and it's so great. His greatest influence is, Louis Armstrong, but he also has absorbed so much of that 20s and 30s jazz feel in the phrasing and approach to the instrument. But he presents it then in sort of very expansive modern kind of concepts. It's really mind expanding in the way the tunes set out and expose themselves. You're just going to have to listen to this, especially with the second tune called Nothing, Nothing, Nothing. And I was just I only wrote whoa when I started listening to this. Now you're going to get the brass ensemble. Low trombone and euphonium notes and a rubato tuba bass figure that set an ominous modal kind of feeling to it. Wiklund adds a weeping cornet with vibrato on top as cymbals rise and piano adds punctuated notes. Wiklund wahs the notes, wah wah, with his hand as the brass come to move together on the lines. This could become a Morricone soundtrack at this point with these weird feelings. A steady wood bass note beat with cymbals form the sparse piano notes and corns together. Wiklund starts a breathy solo that has some kissy, puckish phrase endings before the unified brass riff returns. And then Wiklund goes on with lyrical crying lines over rhythmic piano figures. The modal changes sometimes feel like a Mexican Western theme. As the brass come in for more backing, Wiklund gains energy for some more wah-wahs and powerful lines with shakes. He brings back the melody theme, and it softens to get more mysterious as the bass drum continues, and then piano trickles. Wiklund blows some airy and spitty ideas before a final melody snippet with wahs. This is also very cool. I loved every second of it.
This is probably this album is as much fun to talk about, I think, as it is to listen to.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Track 3, another original, Molin Hopar, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this, like Schur or something, Swedish title, which means the clouds are gathering.
Yeah.
And this one is very unique in that, as I mentioned earlier, he plays the Harmon mute with the stem inserted. So this is the metallic mute. Usually in jazz, you pull the center out of it and you get that, famed Miles Davis kind of sound. But he's got the stem in it so that he can do the wah-wah on it. And usually you don't do that. Unless you want a comedic effect, but he does it, and it's very interesting results. So Wiklund wahs out the sad minor melody over the slow, steady beat of piano and bass notes. They're all right on the beat. He milks the vibrato on some of the longer notes for a fun effect. It's very sparse. There's a slight pause with pickup notes into a major section of the melody. Then it gets bluesy with some bubbly phrases and fun hand tricks of the mute. Toldum starts a piano solo of just a few notes tossed out with lots of space. He gets more legato and connected, but stays completely chilled out, like he took a handful of Quaaludes, and you're not going to wake him up completely. It's so chilled, it's cool. He comes back, Wiklund, with more wah fun, with a bluesy solo and some tongued rhythmic scales. He whips it around with some crazy wide intervals, high to low, and multiple tonguing before coming back to the melody with a cute ending of some bass punctuation in his final phrases. Really, really cool effects here. Track 4, the title, Silver Needle. An even one-note bass beat and dreamy piano figures backed by cymbals start this one out. Wiklund comes in with the funny melody with fluttering triplet subdivision. He's with the fast valve work. It's like almost like a oriental kind of tune feel to it.
I guess for the Chinese tea, huh?
Yeah, could be. It does remind, when my wife, who's Japanese, heard it, said, "What is this, Chinese?" I said, "Well, it could be, because it's about tea." It goes through different strains of melody, like an old time march would or something, and then breaks into a speedy swing beat. Wiklund is up for this challenge of this speedy thing, blowing lots of rhythmic figures, speedy and almost boppy kind of phrased lines. The chase ends and things get quiet while the bass pulse returns for a piano solo to begin. Toldum plays around exploring little rhythmic ideas that ends in a rising series of chords and a final low note, and then Wiklund brings back that fluttering Chinese melody. It's cute, old-fashioned, but yet new and fresh all in one. I really like this guy's concept.
That's really remarkable about this whole album. It manages to be old and new at the same time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Next tune, it's a tune by Sam H. Stept, Comes Love. Wow, this one will set up straight to get this intro. A solo cornet opening here. There's a frenzy of stuff happening that builds off some minor bluesy ideas, puckish rhythmic figures, wahs, screams, unexpected modulations mid-line. It ends just before 1 minute with a final bluesy lick. Wiklund then plays the pickup notes to the melody, and the rhythm section comes in, swinging slowly on this old bluesy tune. Wiklund spits out the melody notes in staccato fashion. Toldum is up for a piano solo, laying a lot of low rhythmic chords at first. He gets into some more rollicking ideas with tumbling phrases. Then Wiklund comes back, and he's in a playful mood. Lots of puckish staccato play, high shakes, and then brings it down soft for the end to tie into the melody reprise. But it leaves you hanging with an out and a final resolved chord. Just sort of ends hanging there. Track 6 is called Thousand Flowers. This one begins with an interesting trombone and euphonium and a cornet rhythmic fanfare of open intervals that sound like they come from a lost civilization in the rainforest. Trumpet trills and low brass support form below as Wiklund adds mournful legato lines above. The brass sections have little leading phrases into different strains. Wiklund then plays the pickup into the bluesy melody, and the brass are harmonized below for kind of a psychedelic New Orleans trip. The melody has a lot of contrasting sections, and this arrangement is just great. Only brass and some light drumming. There's a fun group growling phrase and little sections of answering rhythmic phrases between cornet and brass. Wiklund is playing softly, but shows his full absorption of Louis Armstrong's phrasing style here. He takes a section of solo over only the drums before the brass return. They go through the initial melody strain again and then give some little vamping for some final thoughts from Wiklund. This one is really fabulous. It stood out for its emotional expression. Track 7, Endless Possibilities of Microscopic Moments. Interesting title. You'll figure out what it means. Some cymbal work intro to Wiklund ripping little zipper phrases of the melody. They just zip up and down into staccato note sections. It gets really swinging under his bubbling melodic phrases. Toldum has an adventurous piano solo over some interesting bass lines of Mork, which alternate between repeated notes and then walking phrases. Wiklund comes back for a solo. I think the microscopic moments is the constant harmonic changes here. It's like some of John Coltrane's songs that set up an obstacle course of sort of harmonic and gymnastics to work through for the improviser. Wiklund surfs the changes skillfully, keeping his rhythmic phrasing and bursting out with new ideas, crazy things too. When he finishes up, it's time for a drum solo from Fredriksson that works into a final melody with everyone joining into the end. Track 8, A Speck of Light. Remember that intro to Nothing, Nothing, Nothing? Well, that idea comes back here, except the rhythmic riff that was in the tuba is now in Wiklund's cornet and doubled in Lindborg's trumpet. The low brass come in under that with a shifting and swelling phrases. It's like an inversion of the idea. Midway through, it gets a regular beat from the drums, and the cornet and trumpet figure gets a turbo boost of speed. It just sort of launches into much more than it was before. The low brass drop out, and then the cornet and trumpet diverge into different notes before rejoining and then getting some trombone added before the loping tuba and euphonium join in, and the whole thing gets some trills to it. The trumpet and cornet blow out a final strong line to finish it.
Yeah, this kind of reminded me of jazzy Philip Glass. Yeah. Kind of has all those looping sort of rhythms in it. Yeah.
But that last riff figure becomes the intro of the next tune. So
nice
it sort
touch.
of segues in nicely. It repeats. There's a pause of expectation that happens, but then in contrast, a low or a slow loping swing starts in the rhythm section for the minor melody of the tune that Wiklund blows over, very fat and sassy. He gets really soft and lyrical here, in contrast to that percussive staccato thing he's really good at. Interestingly, he also finds a spot to insert that opening riff in there again, reminding you that you might hear it again, and you will. There's a modulation to major, and then a change of rhythm to double time feel for a section, and then back to the loping minor melody. Toldum then gets a solo piano, that shows off his touch really well here, another side of him, and his articulation is nice with interesting melodic ideas. Wiklund comes back for some fast, playful figures over drum encouragement behind him, beating it out. He works himself into a frenzy. He gets up high, some low trills that come down before he settles back into a final emphatic run through the melody. On the soft section, he even adds some rapid, soft, multiple tonguing. Rather than ending on a chord, it all ends again with that intro riff that built off from the tune before. A very cool idea. And we're going to end out with a little nostalgic thing that's very nice and fitting. That Lucky Old Sun, a tune composed by Beasley Smith and played by Louis Armstrong. Oh, a lovely brass choral arrangement right from the beginning. Wiklund plays the melody delicately with restraint over the warm brass accompaniment. The euphonium has a low counterline to Wiklund's cornet in a section where the others drop out before they come back in. Then with the trumpet having some nice trills underneath. Trombone gets the lead for a strain as well, with some warm, mournful tones that only the trombone can produce, and they wrap it up suddenly after a final cornet strain with a little turkey call shake at the end of the note so that it doesn't get schmaltzy at all. This is definitely going on my best of list so far for the year. Wiklund's style of playing is partially from a time capsule and partially modern. His compositions and arrangement ideas are also matching to his style, somewhat from the distant past and somewhat from the present or future. The result is something completely unique and a real joy to listen to. It just reveals more on each subsequent listen. This is obviously music that he, as he alluded to, has developed over a long period of time and is well thought out. It brings you back to 100 years ago in his style of playing, and yet encompasses all the styles that have come in jazz after that. I really think this is a special recording. It's amazing that especially this New Orleans concept can reach Sweden and find
reaches it through records, right? Yeah,
and find a real mature expression with something added, even in this modern time when Americans don't even appreciate this music that came from our own land. So I think, Wiklund is an anomaly, a unique player that channels the past, but also brings, futuristic things in the music to that old style that he's championed through also the cornet, right, which nobody plays anymore. That was my first instrument, by the way. I played before I switched to trumpet, so I have a soft spot for that. I think it's just a Bix
Beiderbecke's instrument, wasn't it?
Bix Beiderbecke, Rex Stewart, with Ellington. This is a phenomenal experience listening to this, and I just keep listening to it again and again. I can't say enough about it.
And again, this is why you need to listen to the Adult Music Podcast, because who's going to cover this in America? And this is a record, if you like jazz, this really isn't something, it's something you need to hear whether you're going to like it or not, because it's really unique. It's not going to push jazz forward or anything like that, but it's just, it's an anomaly. It's just something really unique and special. I called it wonderfully weird, and I thought that... I said an interesting trumpet recording by a trumpeter with an encyclopedic mind for musical humor, because there's a lot of really funny things happening as well.
Very funny, very, very.
He plays into the past a lot for his sounds, but comes up with unusual situations for these old-fashioned ways of playing. I'm wondering, it's really unique. It's something that needs to be heard. Okay, so. 2 thumbs up here, just because of what it is. It's really something unique and special, I think.
I think so too. There's so many cookie cutter players. This happens in every genre, right? Whenever something comes out and it's the new thing or something, everyone copies it. You remember grunge, right?
Right.
Nirvana and a couple other original bands, and then everybody was sounding like that. And then it got boring. And, it happened in punk music and everything else. In jazz, too. Everyone copies. And, as I said before, the modern kind of trumpet sound is this dark, Teutonic kind of thing that's been kind of, grafted in from those classical sounds of trumpet. And everyone starts to sound the same. And you're like, what happened to all those blazing high, trumpet tones? And then when I hear a player who is outside of the box, like we heard with Jason Palmer, getting back to those kind of old, trumpet tones that can vary with the material and getting a brightness to it, I'm like, oh, this is refreshing. And then hearing this is like, oh, wow, this is like back to different eras, but yet surprisingly modern and fresh at the same time. I get really enthused and excited that jazz will never die, because there'll be someone who reinvents a sound and adds something new to it. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think we might be done with the whole Miles Davis, John Coltrane pushing jazz forward to its next step. I mean, I feel like that era is just done, and we've got what we've got, and people are just going to reinvent certain elements of that. And this sort of is a unique take on the past and present. It's really it's really something. It's hard to really say what it is. Really.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna still hear what we've heard.
I mean, I heard it. It's kind of like those things, like I heard it, so I know it. What's the thing they say? I know something when I see it or hear it.
Oh, right.
I know this is good because I heard it. It sounds good. It's kind of it sounds unique. So I haven't heard anyone else do this.
Well,
so that's what it is. I can't really explain it though.
We've heard a lot of jazz, and I purposely try to be as international as I can on my picks, and hoping we've heard some Israeli jazz. Right. We've heard, other places where the players bring in their own cultural background and, use that as sort of a creative infusion into the material. And I really like that. But then we've heard some kind of surprising anomalies where, whereas we talk to a New York jazz musician, say, no, New York, it's only New York because New York has that swing. But then we heard, and it's true in a bit, there's a lot of Scandinavian jazz that is sort of amorphous and dark and out there. Yeah. But then we've heard the sort of antithesis to that with Snorre Kirk, that sort of old style swinging. And, now we've got here Wiklund. There's no accounting for this going back to that Armstrong model, but then adding all this new things into it. So it's not only players bringing their cultural background. It's just maybe focusing on, some great point at one period and then expanding on that too. But anyway, I'm secure in the idea that there'll be players from all different places who will have these creative infusions and then bring something new. Bringing back something we liked from the past. Jazz has enough history for that. And this is one everyone should check out. So Silver Needle, Tobias Wiklund. I think any trumpet players and jazz fans should definitely hear this one.
All right, there we go. All
right, I think we're coming up to a record length.
This might be, we may have hit the 3-hour mark, but I can't tell. I don't remember when we started.
Anyway, I think there's enough here on this program to make it worth it.
There's certainly enough.
Yeah. So definitely check out these recordings.
This would be the best. Yeah, the Tobias Wiklund, I would say, would be the best recording I heard this week. And, the other trumpet concerto one would be the best classical one.
Yeah, so best classical one. Otherwise, everything's nice. Check it out. I would say in the jazz.
Well, it's not all nice, though. We talked about that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
In jazz, it was all nice.
Okay. Yeah.
Classical, I don't know. I'll have.
We'll see.
Well, I don't know what I'm going to have next week. We're going French next week.
Are we doing the French thing?
Okay. We're doing French episode number 3. It's about time.
I'm ready.
We've laid off that for an hour. Are you ready to be Frenched again?
I've got my French things lined up, so we'll do that French number 3 next episode. Well,
sounds good.
I look forward to that. We'll have the playlist up on our Deezer account and Facebook page tomorrow after this episode is released. So if you want to check things out early and you stayed with us this long, I'll be sure to check that out. Before we sign off, thanks again to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our neon glowing logo that always stands out on all the podcasts. We appreciate that. Once again, please do like or subscribe on whatever platform you listen to us on. And that helps us get some new listeners. We appreciate that. If you want to contact us directly, it's Adult Music Podcast, all one word, at gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And look forward to all things French, number 3, next week for episode 68. Any final closing things, Mike, before we go out?
No. I have absolutely nothing left to say. I've said everything.
Said everything this week. Anyway, so look forward to a French experience next week, and we'll have that up tomorrow. So check it out after you listen to this.
Hey Rich, how was that French accent?
Yeah. Anyway.
Mon Dieu.
We'll be back with some things all French next week.
I'm feeling French already.
I am too. So until then, keep listening, and we'll see you next time.